somebody that is on their deathbed, if you were to ask them or ask someone else if they were saved, most likely they would say that we hope so, but we just don't know. But then, if they died that day, the next day at their funeral, there would be assurance, you know. And I've seen that over and over again. And it's, in my mind, the reason that we are so quick to make that assumption the day after they're gone is because it's like, now we know for sure that they stayed faithful to the very end. And by faithful, we mean they never left fellowship. I feel like at this stage, this many years since William started all of this, we're all as much a victim, if you want to call it that, of the doctrine and the mindset. And so when I finally realized that this is not just a man that was somehow able to pull off the perfect life, but this was God himself that put himself in human form, that suffered and was tempted in all points as we are, that was willing to let himself be put to death, that it was God on that cross for me. I mean, that's what really puts the power in the gospel, is that it wasn't just what he did, but who he was. That's what makes it, that's what makes it so powerful, because when you realize that the one true God, the God of this universe, did that for me, it's personal, and it's a very, I don't know, if that doesn't inspire you to have faith, I don't know what will. But and then it instantly removes any of the works-based thoughts, because you know, if that was God, there's no way I could do what he did.
Yeah. And let me be the first to say, when you leave meetings, like, you are leaving a total, like, you're leaving your identity behind. And that's not comfortable. It's not easy. But, like, we get to discover who we are in Christ. And who we are, like, freedom from bondage.
I've said that I didn't really understand what it means to die to self until we left meetings, because you do put yourself to death. That old you is gone. I've heard that from family that, you know, they miss who I used to be, but that person is gone. And I don't want him back.
Yeah.
I would not trade what I have found in Christ for anything.
For anyone who feels like they're on the fence, it's like, I know it's daunting and it seems scary, but it's like, God is there. I promise you.
I am in a rental car in Texas, and let me tell you how I got here. So about 4 weeks ago, I got a Facebook, through Messenger, a Facebook phone call, however that works. And from somebody I've never talked to, don't know who he is. We've talked to him quite a bit since then, but we visited on the phone for about 45 minutes to an hour. And during that time, he told me probably 3 times that I should really reach out to this couple to have them share their story. And so I was like, well, do you have their contact information so you can pass it on to me and I can give them a call? Or do you have a way of getting a hold of them? And he said no. And so I was like, okay. And we ended the call. And 42 minutes later, I get an email from this guy he was talking about on the phone that I should contact. So I reached back out to the first guy, and I'm like, hey, did you find a way to get a hold of him? And he's like, no. And I was like, you're never going to believe this, but he just emailed me and said that he felt led to share his testimony and what God did delivering him out of the 2x2s. So that was definitely a God story, and that is why I'm down in Texas. So we're going to share their story today. The cool thing is, I think they may be the youngest couple that I've done an interview with. And so, anyways, I'm very excited to meet them and to share their story with you and spend the day with them today. So, got to drive about an hour this morning, but we will be there soon.
David, I'm reaching out to you because I've felt drawn to tell my story in an interview with you as it relates to the truth, if you feel it could be helpful to others. Your videos were a critical piece of my wife and I's decision to leave the fellowship. I cannot express how helpful it was to see and listen to sane, rational people explain their experiences, feelings, new understanding, and newfound freedom in Christ. I am 29 years old and am fifth generation born and raised in the fellowship, and was living on the Happy, Texas convention grounds up until leaving the fellowship last April. My family has owned these grounds since the 20s and still does today. Having a long history with the convention grounds has given me some unique insight into how things have been done in our part of the country, at least. I was very much committed to the fellowship before everything unraveled after Dean Brewer's death. Most of my immediate family is still in the fellowship, as well as my aunt and uncle and most of their children who own the Texarkana convention grounds. My extended family has been torn apart over the fellowship for decades. My wife is third generation born and raised from Colorado. She spent almost 2 years in the work in Colorado starting in 2013. Her experience in the work has helped me understand some of what it's like from a worker's perspective. Most of her family is also still a part of the fellowship. We have been through a lot leaving this fellowship, but God has been so faithful and good to us. We recently have started attending a church where a relative attends and have found it to be a wonderful experience. It's been a journey and there is still so much to learn, but we have found joy and peace in simply trusting in Christ and believing that He who has promised is faithful to deliver. My hope in doing an interview with you would be to appeal to young families, and especially young men who are still in the fellowship, to take a firm stand for what is right, good, and true, and be willing to draw a hard line against what is evil and untrue. I've been disappointed by the lack of a strong and decisive response that I've seen amongst the men in this group. It takes courage, faith, and character to risk everything you have and everyone you know to do the right thing. Sadly, so many are not willing to pay the price, it seems. I would like to address the Texas and Mexico staff directly in the interview if possible. I sent the staff a letter when we left and heard back from quite a few, some wanting to come visit with us, including Lal Schober, but at the time I didn't feel it was a good idea. I would like to explain to them why I rejected their offers. All that said, if it's something you'd be interested in, please let me know. I look forward to hearing from you. Please feel free to call or text as well. Sincerely, Ty Adams.
All workers are going to heaven. Like, that was like a guarantee in my mind all the way up until probably even recently. That's a huge part of my story, really. My sister and I joke, but I think it's very true. I find myself as a recovering people pleaser. Just because there is so much of my own story and things that I've walked through and like gone back and really thought about, like, why did I make that decision? Mm-hmm. Was it to serve God or was it to serve man? And 99% of the time it has been to serve man.
That's a strange thing when I go back and think about that here's something that I think is so wonderful, and yet I don't really want to share it with my friends because deep down I know I don't really have anything to offer them that they don't already have.
Like, okay, if this is really God's only way on earth, why does it vary so much?
Mm-hmm.
And I see that now that I've been on the other side of it. I see the joy and the peace that we've found outside of the meetings.
So by what I was doing, by my example, by how I dressed, by how I acted, by the things that I did, by my works, that was the only Bible they were ever going to read.
It feels like there was several times that God almost tried to warn us off.
About 9 months in, something like there was a switch that flipped, and all of a sudden, I've never struggled with mental health. I was suicidal within like a day, and it was just from that point on, just like things just got really bad. I just couldn't. I didn't like throwing up prior to every meeting. There was a moment when I was in the work that I had probably the most real talk with God, but it didn't have anything to do with being in the work. It had everything to do with I had a talk with God.
So, how did it feel to marry a worker, Ty?
It wasn't the format of our meetings that gave us, it didn't have to be the same format as we were used to be able to get something out of our time together. And in fact, for us, it was the opposite, changing the format and allowing for more discussion and things like that really helped us to dig deeper into the scripture. And we were really looking forward to moving there, but yet really conflicted with the spiritual aspect of it all. As far as the physical part of moving to the grounds, yeah, we were excited about living there, but with everything going on with meetings, it was really conflicting at the same time. How can we be okay with all of these things that we've learned and still move to the grounds? I decided before preps that I needed something to help me with my stress and anxiety leading up to that. And so I actually got on some medication for that, and that helped. It felt like kind of a necessary evil, I guess, in my mind. Like I didn't want to have to rely on something like that to be able to host convention, but I just felt like there really wasn't any other way.
This was going to be the first time we were going to have 7 strangers in our home that we didn't know anything about, and I put my faith in the staff. Like, that was the only thing I could do, was put my faith in them. Like, okay, these people. I don't know how well, but hopefully well enough that I'm letting them in my home.
Because usually the people from, what are they? Visitors, they call them, I guess, are the ones that stay in the home, right?
Yeah,
typically the visiting brothers.
Okay.
And I actually had a conversation with Ty before the convention. I said, what do you think they would say if I told them I would only allow visiting sisters in our home?
And so then I find out there's a different number. So I said, what's going on? And I was told that the decision had been made that we needed to control who could call in and who couldn't. The last thing that we as those who are still, invested in it would want is for it to appear like we have something to hide. And so to me, by blocking people from calling in, that's immediately what I would think if I was them, is, well, they don't want us to hear what they have to say.
That was probably the first time where I had to come to this realization that, like, where my faith was. And it was not in God at that time. My faith was very much in man. My faith was in the fellowship. The fellowship was my foundation. All my life, basically, I felt like I was believing, or what I had my faith in was a lie.
With a situation that I didn't feel like was handled right. And it just really hit me because it just felt like him too. Like, even this person has been aware of this kind of abuse going on and been involved in decisions that were made, and there was a lot of advocacy for pausing conventions and stuff so that there would be a time of reflection and sorting through all of this, and I think that would have been a great idea. But we know what would have happened if a bunch of people would have had time to really stop and think, to pause and consider everything they had heard. But instead, we just kept trudging through, you know?
Yeah.
As if everything was still normal.
Right.
But
But yes, even just on a natural level, yes, if they are our spiritual leaders, why are these heinous things happening? And not only why is it happening, but why is it being covered up? And why are they allowed to continue to be in a place of importance and also be in a place where they can continue to do whatever it is that they're doing?
On the one hand, we're not like anybody else, right? Like
Yeah.
we're different. We are not like every other church. But then when it came to the abuse,
All of a sudden,
almost the excuse was, well, this
well,
happens
we're like
anywhere.
everywhere else. People aren't perfect, but God's way is.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but what is the way? Are we talking about the ministry, this fellowship, or are we talking about Jesus?
But she mentioned about her foundation being in the fellowship, and I think that was mine too, but I wouldn't have admitted that even to
Oh,
myself
well,
before. I
no.
didn't realize that. But I think you have to be very honest with yourself to allow yourself to even throw that idea around, you know.
Yeah,
Because
it's not an
not
easy
comfortable.
thing
It's not.
to
It's
admit.
not easy to think that all this time I may have put my trust in the wrong thing. I've felt a change in myself in ways that I've never been able to find victory in things I've felt since leaving, because there has been a full surrender to Christ and the power that He has to change me, not myself.
I know people that don't go to meetings that are probably better Christians than I am, that have a greater faith in God than I do. The meetings were not really a place where we felt like spiritually encouraged. It's definitely a place where you would go to feel like, well, we're in the right place and we're doing what we should be doing.
I battled that, but then it finally got to the point where I realized it's just not possible for me to truly live in the liberty of Christ and still be a part of the fellowship. I just couldn't do it. It was about protecting image, protecting reputation of a family. We can't let people know that something like this is happening. You know, I know a lot of people don't like the word cult, but to me that was one of the things that felt more like a cult than anything else.
So I shared a little bit of how I got here with the viewers already. It's a pretty cool story. When I had that conversation with this guy and he mentioned it. Did you share it with?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So, and then 42 minutes later you email me and say, hey, I'm ready to share my story. So that was really cool. So this is Ty and Kayla Adams. And a lot of you probably know them already. I guess you're well known down here. I don't know.
By some, anyway.
By
Some, yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
So you guys lived on the Happy Convention Grounds for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But everybody knows who lives on the convention grounds. So anyways, so I'm excited to hear you guys' story and what has happened the last couple of years. And I hear it's a good one, so we'll find out.
We'll let the viewers decide that, I guess.
So yeah, just start wherever you want to start. I used to spend more time kind of on your childhood and how you grew up and stuff. And you can share as much as you want on that, and then we can get into the more recent. But you were fifth generation, you said?
Yeah, so on my dad's side, it's fifth generation, and then on my mom's, it'd be fourth.
Okay.
So.
And then Kayla, you were...
Be third on my mom's and then just second on my dad's.
Okay. All right, so start wherever you want to start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I guess just a little bit of childhood section would be, so I grew up obviously going to meetings. It's, I would say, the biggest part of my life up until now was meetings. That was my identity. Big thing, big important part of my whole family's history and life, really, especially with the convention grounds. My great grandparents lived there since the 20s.
3 greats?
Yeah.
Two
Well,
greats.
great.
Two greats. Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they moved to this area back in the 20s and ended up buying the place that's now the grounds, and they eventually were asked to have convention there, and so it's been there ever since the 20s. And
The 1920s.
yeah.
Since we're actually
Oh,
in
yeah.
the 20s again.
But
Crazy.
yeah, it is. So nearly 100 years. But anyway, that's always been. I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't call it a point of pride, but just an important tie, I guess, for us to meetings has been our involvement there. And so since I was a little boy, it just, because of the way family dynamics were and everything, I knew it was possible that I might end up on the grounds someday. And we can get into it later, but as I got older, the choices that I made after being married and everything was always with that in mind, that we might move to the grounds. And so that shaped a lot of our decisions. But
So you weren't raised on the grounds, though, right?
No. So after my great grandparents passed away, there was a couple, Joe and Anna Price, that lived there on the grounds and worked for my great grandparents. And so the house that's there now was built, and they moved into that, and they lived there for basically 50 years.
And
I
that's
think they've
Jim
been on the
Price's
place.
brother, is
Yes.
that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Younger brother. So I grew up about 30 minutes south of there, and but we were always heavily involved in anything that went on there, all the work projects and everything. But anyway, I professed when I was 8. There was something I was gonna say about that. Oh, I
When
told
you were
Kayla, we were talking
grandma.
about this the other night,
Yeah.
and that was the year I became a scribe. I said.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I remember taking notes that year like it was going out of style, I guess. But I would say I mean, I professed because I wanted to profess. Nobody talked me into that or anything. And in fact, my grandma on my mom's side, she actually, I remember her asking me, like, are you professing because you really think you need to, or because your cousin professed? And one of my cousins that I was close to, he had professed the year before at Texarkana, and so I'm sure that factored into it a little bit. But I wanted to profess, and I was wholeheartedly into it for sure. But anyway, I was baptized when I was 18. I remember baptism was a little bit interesting for me. It wasn't, I would say it wasn't exactly like when I professed. Some of it was like it felt like something I needed to do because that was a thing to do. I wouldn't say it felt like like it was really the time that I needed to do it, but I just felt like, I'm 18, I'm fixing to be leaving home, and I just need to do it, But I talked to a worker before I was baptized, and the thing that was mentioned was just maybe the reason I'd waited that long was because I'd be able to be a better example to my younger siblings, because I waited so long. Now they were old enough that maybe it would have an effect on them
So
to
they
see
could
me
be
baptized.
sooner.
I guess, I don't know, but
Looking back on it now, when you professed and when you were baptized, do you think it was just because that's what we do, or do you think there was something more?
I mean, I feel like, for me being 8, obviously my understanding was limited, but I did feel like I had a desire to serve God, and that was the only way I knew how to do that, was to profess. And I wanted to take part in the meeting. I think when I was younger, I even thought like maybe I would go in the work when I was really young. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure part of it, that's just what we did, so that's what I did. But it wasn't, I didn't ever feel like pressured to profess or be baptized or anything. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's kind of the little backstory of my childhood. But I certainly had a great childhood, and I enjoyed the meetings as much as anybody did, I'm sure, as a kid. I think for me it was a big part of my identity, like I said, and I would have never ever dreamed I would leave. I mean, that was not even a thought in my mind. But
So Kayla, what about your childhood? You grew up in Colorado?
Yes. So I grew up, we moved to Denver when I was 5. So we actually lived in Amarillo for 2 years before that.
Okay.
And
so
then,
you're actually kind of from here?
Kind of. I knew a lot of the friends. There's some of the friends that we still, like, we all have kids now. But they were some of the ladies that I used to run around with when we were like 5, 6, 7. So, and then before that, we were in Idaho. So I was actually born in Idaho Falls. But we moved when I was 3, so I don't really have too many memories of that. But yeah, I grew up going to meetings. I really had an awesome childhood. My parents were amazing. They still are. Had a really good relationship with my siblings, and still do. I was 10 when I professed. And for me, I really didn't I didn't think about it probably much before the convention in which I professed at. There was a group of kids. We were all waiters serving one of the tables at convention, and I don't know who brought it up, but somebody got on the topic of like, well, who's going to profess this convention? It was probably on Saturday. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, I should. Like, why haven't I, And again, I was 10, so like Ty said, like, there's only so much that we really understand, especially about God. But I feel like my decision to profess partially was because I'm just like naturally a people pleaser. So there was probably a part of me that like, this would make my parents happy, this would make the workers happy, and my friends, because I've always seen it as such a joyous moment. Like after every time a meeting is tested, I mean, that is the response that we get, right? Like everybody is very emotional, and not to say that that's a bad thing or that's wrong, but it's it makes a big impression on a kid. So there was that part of it, but there was also equally as much or more so a part of like, I want to please God. And to a 10-year-old, I don't know how to do that, but it seems like making my choice. Like I do want to serve him. I did want to serve him. That was a big part of it. So I did profess when I was 10, and I really had, like up until that point, I really didn't pay much attention in meetings. And then after I professed, now I'm taking part. Like, it was actually amazing that, like, what I got out of the meetings and stuff at that point. It was good.
It's almost like you switch levels or something. Because
like leveled up.
Yeah. You're treated, I mean, you're still a kid, but you're treated a little bit differently because now you're a big kid or something.
Yeah.
But I like what you said as far as like the people pleasing thing, I think for me it was kind of the same thing, and there's got to be a psychological part of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is, first of all, this is all you've ever known, but yeah, there is a reward almost of
Sure.
congratulations, and like, you know, you're doing the right thing, and I think all kids will want that.
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
so seeing that, like you said, in others probably plays a big part in it too. I think
Yeah.
that makes sense.
That's a huge part of my story, really.
Yeah.
My sister and I joke, but I think it's very true. I find myself as a recovering people pleaser, just because there is so much of my own story and things that I've walked through and like gone back and really thought about, like, why did I make that decision?
Mm-hmm.
Was it to serve God or was it to serve man? And 99% of the time it has been to serve man. And we'll probably touch on it more later, but that's a huge decision or a huge factor in my decision to leave the meetings was just that, like, I can't serve two masters.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if I'm going to choose one, I'm going to serve God. And I know some people will say, like, well, you can do that while going to the meetings, and that may be true for some, but like for me and my story, it was one or the other.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of interrupted you. So
No, it's okay.
you professed when you were 10, and then what?
I was baptized when I was thinking about that the other day. I can't remember now if I was 14 or 16 because there's certain parts of the story that I remember. Like I was between junior high and high school when I had this thought of baptism. And I was pretty sure it was the following May. So we'll go with that. So I was, my freshman year of high school is when I was baptized. Baptism for me, again, I think it just felt like it was the next step. Like I was ready for something more in my relationship with God, but also that was kind of the thing that you did in high school. It seemed like most of my friends were either baptized already or were thinking about it. And on like a deep spiritual level, I don't know if I really understood it at the time. You know, some of the workers would have baptism meetings and what that means. And I never understood why we could partake of the bread and wine after baptism. And I still don't quite understand that, especially if partaking in the bread and wine is somehow tied to our relationship with God and salvation. Why is that only offered to those that are baptized? Those are all questions that are still kind of, it just is confusing a little bit in my, like from my childhood. I also never quite understood why we had to wear skirts in front of like the workers and grandparents and like a certain set of people, but it wasn't as required elsewhere. When can't God see us no matter where we are?
Yeah, that seems to vary quite a bit throughout the country, whether you can wear pants at certain times or not.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things like that in my mind, I'm like, okay, if this is really God's only way on earth, why does it vary so much? And there's bigger things, doctrinal things, that I feel like it's the same way, you know, like divorce and remarriage. Like, why is it okay? Or it has varying opinions. And
and the result of that, what happens after that happens.
Yeah. And then one of the friends in the area that I grew up in, they pretty much mentioned every Sunday about how any outsiders are going to a lost eternity. And my siblings and I would go like on and off about how that really was concerning, because all of our friends, I mean, we went to a big high school in the Denver area, and we were the only like professing kids in that high school. So naturally, almost all of our friends
Are going to hell.
Mm-hmm. And that, like when you take that on as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, like, that is a huge burden. And for me, like I felt almost personally responsible to somehow save them, because I didn't want them to go to hell, you know? So by what I was doing, by my example, by how I dressed, by how I acted, by the things that I did, by my works, that was the only Bible they were ever going to read, because I'd been told that multiple times. Not necessarily by my parents, but by different friends, by workers. And I don't think it's wrong to be a good example, but what are we being an example to? Are we being an example to how we follow men, or are we being an example of how to truly be followers of Christ? So, and again, this is kind of the recurring theme of people pleasing. And another huge part of my story is a works-based fellowship versus a faith-based, or not, well, it could be fellowship, but salvation, a works-based salvation versus faith-based.
One thing I mentioned, she was talking about her friends in school being lost. We were talking the other night about this, and it just seems like for kids, especially when you have friends that are, that say that they believe in Christ, and that their family is religious. Not that being religious is the goal, but that there's something there at least. And they claim to serve the same God you do, but yet you're being told that their faith is null and void somehow. The only thing that the kid can conclude is that it's because they're not a part of our group. That's the only difference here that I can see, And so that presents this conundrum in a kid's mind. Why is that the case? Why is what we are doing so much different than what they're doing? That's hard for kids to deal with. I think it just poses unnecessary confusion to a kid to put them in that situation where they have to reason that out. But obviously now I say it a lot different than I did then. But I guess in some ways I feel like I just kind of accepted that it was just this sad reality that that's just the way things were going to be. For me, I never felt like evangelizing to my friends. And I don't really know why, because I believed what I believed, and I was very...
It's not their kids, it's their dogs.
Yeah. We didn't leave them in the backyard.
They're disappointed about not being in the interview, but it's not that I wasn't committed to what I believed and didn't enjoy what I believed, but for some reason, I think in the back of my mind, I just felt like I really didn't have anything to offer them that they would want. And that's a strange thing when I go back and think about that here's something that I think is so wonderful, and yet I don't really want to share it with my friends, because deep down I know I don't really have anything to offer them that they don't already have. And I see that now that I've been on the other side of it. I see the joy and the peace that we've found outside of the meetings that my friends had the whole time. And it's just confirming to me that it's no wonder they weren't really interested in what I had. I mean, I really did not have hardly anybody ask me questions about what it was that we were doing, and I think it's because they could tell I didn't have anything that they wanted. And it's not a matter of we don't want it because we're not willing for the sacrifice, or we're not willing to be obedient to what God's asked of us. It's just, I think it's clearer to more people than we realized that we were actually in more bondage than we thought. We didn't really have liberty in Christ like we thought we did. So anyway, that's been interesting to look back on. But
okay, so how did you guys meet and get married and that kind of stuff?
Well, she tracked me down. So after I left home, graduated high school, I went to Canyon and went to WT college there for a little bit. And I ended up, her brother was living in Amarillo. He had a 1-bedroom apartment, and ended up, we got a 2-bedroom apartment together. And so I was rooming with him for a while, and she had come down to see him, and so that's when she first decided she was
She
gonna
first laid eyes
take
on
me
you.
as her prey. So
And I did not know how old he was. He was actually 19 at the time. I was 24. And he acted so much more mature and older, which for guys, it's really interesting. Most of the time they don't. So I was just very impressed with him. And I came down one time in August, I think. And we didn't really talk a lot then. But then I came back in like November sometime. And I remember my brother being like, "So what do you think of Ty?" And I was like, "Well, he's a nice guy. Like, he's funny and he's easy to be around and all that." And I don't know if that's kind of what got the ball rolling, or I'm pretty sure I liked him before that, but I was just like, what do I think of Ty? Like, so I don't know. We had several conversations that, I guess I was probably there 2 weeks that time. I was coming down to help my brother on some tile jobs he was working. And then I think one evening he had some young kids over and we had like a little get together.
game night.
We had a game night, yeah. There was a specific game that we were playing and I don't know, just like kind of felt like something was clicking. And so I think like 2 or 3 nights later, it's like, I just have to tell him, like I kind of have feelings for him, you know? And I didn't know where he was at, but in my mind, I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Like, I just need to get this off my chest. So I came to him and...
Yeah, I'm in my room with the door closed, and she knocks on the door. So I open up the door. I probably didn't even hardly open it up more than just to stick my head out the door. And so she tells me that she's interested in me, and she just had to tell me. And I was so dumbfounded. I was just like, okay, and shut the door. And so I went and like sat down on my bed, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, I mean, it never even crossed my mind that she would be interested in me, and I wasn't looking for a girlfriend at the time. And so it took me by surprise for sure. But I don't remember if I called my mom then.
I think you did, maybe. I guess I can't remember.
Or if that was later.
You were on the phone with her, so and I can tell he was on the phone with someone before I got up the nerves to actually say something, and he was like giggling like a little kid, and I'm like, he's probably talking to some other girl, like. But again, I'm.
That effect on him.
But then again, I'm like, I'm just gonna lay it out there, and if he's interested in someone else, that's fine. Like, I can move on. At least I said something. And so then he shut the door in my face, not rudely, but it was just like, okay, and then like shut the door, and I'm like, okay, well, that's that. Like, I'll just go to bed and we'll see. And then it was probably like 15 minutes later or something.
Yeah.
You came back out, right? And you were like, I'm sorry, I just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave you hanging. Like, he's like, I wouldn't want. He's like, I know how I would feel if somebody did that to me or something. He's like, I don't know.
I don't think I really said a whole lot as far as
maybe you didn't.
If I had an answer for you or whatever. But anyway, she was sleeping out in the living room. So then the next morning before I went to school, I left her a note on the couch there, and asked her out on a date. So anyway, that's kind of how that
kind of started. So that was November of 16, and then we got married in December of 17. About a year later.
Cool. Okay, so then what's the story look like to the convention grounds?
It was not a straight one, that's for sure. So
yeah,
that's kind of a big, kind of almost a mystery to us in a way. Like, we knew that would be a possibility, but there was just kind of almost a war in our mind of like if that's really what we should do or not. Looking back on it now, it's hindsight's 2020. You know, it's like it feels like there was several times that God almost tried to warn us off of that. But at the time, you know, it was like because of the way that we, in my opinion, the way I didn't understand how God works and how he prompts you and things like that, I felt like it was more a struggle of me being willing to move to the grounds and not so much that it might not be what we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was so many times where we would feel like we were just waiting for the day to move to the grounds, and then out of nowhere there would be this very strong feeling of not only should we not move to the grounds, but we should move out of the state.
You can go get your baby if you need to.
Okay.
We'll leave everybody on a cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger.
There you
Okay.
All right, we're going to go for a walk in the park. And Kayla, you just dropped a bombshell that I shouldn't have skipped over, but
No, it's okay.
she said
Get my seatbelt on.
that she was in the work for a couple of years. So share a little bit about that.
Yes, so when I was in college, I had a very personal experience that I went through, and it left me feeling like the only way that I was going to be able to apologize to God for what I had done was to offer further work. I felt like that was, of all the things, of all the works that I could do in life, that was going to be the one that
would make it right.
That would make it right. And that would give me a chance at salvation.
That's funny because, not that I didn't do anything wrong when I was a kid, but I thought that was my only way to heaven regardless. It wasn't
Oh,
trying to
really?
make up for something.
Yeah.
It was, if I go in the work, that will be the only chance I could have to have enough time to read
Yeah.
and to pray enough and, all those
Yeah.
things.
Well, it certainly was, and like, all workers are going to heaven. Like, that was like a guarantee in my mind all the way up until probably even recently, because of this like works-based salvation, like those that do really good. And growing up, like the workers were, and I shouldn't say that, because being in the work, like I'm like, okay, I did not want to be on a pedestal, and there were some that were treated that way and didn't want to be treated that way, and I think I was one of those. Like, it was very uncomfortable. I didn't like being different, or treating, like, I didn't want to be spoiled. I didn't, all these things that we
And you
were.
knew that's what happens usually.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I was aware of that, but I didn't like it. I've always felt very uncomfortable whenever we were spoiled, I guess, for lack of a better term.
So how did you offer, and like, why? So, okay, you gave us the motivation, I guess. It wasn't like you felt called necessarily. It was trying to
Yeah,
make
like,
up for something.
in some ways. So I was in a relationship in college that I remember praying, if that relationship didn't work out, that I would offer for the work. And I had no reason to pray that, because that relationship at the time was going really, really well. So then that relationship ended. You can choose to add this or not, but like, he ended up offering for the work. So that's why our relationship didn't continue.
Okay.
So fast forward to this experience that I went through that caused me to think about the work. I remembered that prayer. And I was like, well, I did vow that to God. And so I guess maybe it was a little bit two-part. The first part being that I felt like that was the only way I was going to be redeemed. And then the second part of, well, I did say if that relationship that had happened a year or so prior, like, I would offer for the work. So in some ways I did feel like I fulfilled the vow of offering, but in actually going in the work was more because of how I felt. That was the only way I could be redeemed. So I did offer for the work. It was very quick. We were at convention, and it was
How old were you?
I just graduated college, so I was 22.
Okay.
So it was the summer of 2013. I offered for the work. I mean, it was literally happened in a period of convention that I felt like that's what I should do. And I went and talked to Jim Price, and I mean, it wasn't like, oh yes, we'll take you right away. You know, it was kind of like, okay, well, think about it. Of course, I had just graduated college, and my original plans kind of fell through. And so it was like, I felt like all these doors were closing. So again, it was like, oh, it's because I need to go into work.
Sure.
So I didn't have any of the struggle that so many people did, where they struggle with it for several years and all this like back and forth. It was just like, oh yeah, sign me up. Like, that's where I need to be because I need to be right with God. And then I actually started in the work January of 14. So that was 6 months later.
So they took you on.
So they took me. Yep.
All right, we're going to go for a walk and we'll continue that story. Okay, so change of plans. It's really windy, so instead of messing up the audio and the mics, we're gonna go somewhere else. So, anyways, okay. So Kayla, you were talking about going into work, and then this is my personal curiosity, but when they accepted you or whatever, did they give you like a list of things to do first, or how did that work?
So I was kind of aware based on other people's experiences of offering for the work. Like, I kind of knew what they were looking for, I suppose. Like, work experience, probably wanted to know where I was at financially as far as like if I had any debt. It's interesting looking back at it now. It wasn't so much about my spiritual life, like what qualified me to preach the ministry. But the conversation that I had, like, it was pretty one-sided. It was mostly just me talking about, I just graduated college. I don't have any student debt because I was able to make a lot of arrangements throughout college and work and all that. But I was still paying off a car. And so I mentioned that. I said, I've been out of the house for 4.5 years. In a lot of ways, it felt like an interview just because, and I don't know, maybe that's just how I perceived it. Like,
so did they sit you down and
yes,
had a conversation?
So the conversation happened Saturday night after the last meeting at convention at Elizabeth, and I went to the home because that's where I knew Jim was. So I offered to Jim Price, and it happened in the living room with one other worker. They just sat across. They had me in a chair and they were sitting in the couch, and just kind of a conversation in a sort of a dimly lit living room. But I mean, the conversation itself went really well, and I was really nervous, so I just rattled off a bunch of reasons why I thought I should be in the work. But I also was just kind of telling them, like, I just have to, I have to go in the work. It was like a desperate feeling, but it wasn't because of this desperation of feeling a call to the work. It was a desperation in myself of wanting to get right with God. And so there wasn't much to it other than that. It lasted maybe an hour, probably.
So then did they tell you yes then?
No.
Okay.
I honestly don't remember what they said. They didn't say yes, but they just were not in agreement. Okay, well, we'll see, kind of. And so I was anxious. After that, I was okay,
sure.
I'm ready to go right now, and let's get this going before somebody talks me out of it, or I talk myself out of it, or something else happens. So I was emailing Jim every month. And then finally he said, okay, I think we'll get through special meeting rounds, which in Colorado is, at the time, is between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think it's a little earlier than that now. But at least I kind of had a date. So it's okay, I'll probably start either during special meeting rounds or shortly after. So it ended up being right after the special meeting rounds. So kind of the middle of their year, when they assign different areas. So I started halfway through the year. And then So, like I said, I started in January. I was in one area until summer conventions, and then I was in another area. And actually, that year we covered 2 separate areas. And then the following year was in technically my 4th area. But in my first 6 months, I think I went to like 8 or 9 conventions.
Wow.
So there's the 4 between Colorado and Utah. And then I went to Georgia and Florida and did all of those conventions as a visiting sister. I was more like a helping sister because I was still, like, they're short-staffed. So I didn't really feel like a visitor. I felt more like I was on the staff helping, which I preferred that because it sort of kept me out of that, like, feeling spoiled. Like I was actually doing something.
Yeah.
Like I was doing the dishes and doing the laundry. And
So you said you were in the work for 2 years, roughly?
just under.
Okay. So when you went into the work, did that fix all of your desires to become right with God?
So it did something. And looking back at it, like, I don't want this to sound bad, but like, I think what it did was it silenced the devil for a time, because I was no longer doubting. And I felt like this is where I needed to be. But about 9 months in, something, like, there was a switch that flipped, and all of a sudden, I've never struggled with mental health. I was suicidal within like a day, and it was just from that point on, just like things just got really bad, and I didn't admit any of that to anyone. In fact, I didn't even admit that to like Ty or even my dad until like last year. So like I was dealing with all of that, but I was like, okay, no, this is where God wanted, or like, this is where I need to be. Why do I feel this way? So I sort of just like worked out, went to the gym. The sister that I was with was fantastic in that. Like, she was great with me going and doing all this stuff. And I think she maybe chalked it up to me being young. I mean, I was only 23 at the time. It's like we were in a kind of a slower field, so I just needed like activity and all this. So I was keeping myself busy. But I was also getting very, very anxious when it came to getting ready for gospel meetings. And I was like throwing up. I was so anxious just trying to like read my Bible. I would read, just like as much as possible. And I was working out, and I was getting down to a very unhealthy weight. But like the suicidal stuff, like that all went away. But I think now I had this whole like new set of problems where now it's still like I would only eat like meat and veggies, which is not a bad thing, but it was almost like to the point where I was eating half of what I probably should have been eating. So I'd always refuse the desserts. I'd always refuse fruit. I'd always refuse like butter on my toast. It almost got to the point where I was like angry if people put butter on my toast and be like, I don't want that. But I was trying to control what little I had control over.
Yeah.
So it was just a spiral of this like mental mindset, and all in the like, while also trying to balance a relationship with God, which I felt like I had. Like, there was a moment where I really did feel like very at peace with God. But that moment, I was also like loved by the friends in the area, and I had a really good relationship with my coworker, and so it's really hard, like looking back at it, to really sort through, okay, was it really my relationship with God that was going so well, or was it my environment? And that was prior to the mental health spiral. And so then all of that happened, and I know that there are some that tolerate it for a lot longer period of time, but I just couldn't. I didn't like throwing up prior to every meeting. You know, I did go into the doctor's office, and they prescribed me like an anti-nausea medication, basically. And I was walking out of the doctor's office with the prescription in my hand, and I called Jim, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I don't want to live my life on, not saying that you can't live your life on a medication, because I'm absolutely, mental health is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's really great help, like options out there. But for me, I knew what I could change for that to go away. And Jim was like, okay, do you need to go home today, or like what's the time frame, you know? And I said, well, I could probably do enough gospel meetings just so you can get somebody to come help my coworker. And so it was within a week that I went home. So that was in September of 2015.
Okay. So ultimately you left because of the stress and the anxiety and the mental
and I do, like, I remember praying to God, like, keep me here. Like, if this is where you need me, make this go away. Like, do something so that I can do this and continue to do this. And that was from like January to September when I left, but I was struggling with all of that and continue to pray, like, that if I'm where I'm supposed to be, that those things, like, he would help those things, which I knew he had the power to do. But
so did going into the work then satisfy your need to feel like you were right with God, or did that come back after you left?
There was a moment when I was in the work that I had probably the most real talk with God, but it didn't have anything to do with being in the work. It had everything to do with I had a talk with God, and that's when I felt like God forgave me. Now, it took a lot longer for me to forgive myself, but I do feel like I had that.
Okay, so that just happened while you were in the work, but not because of it. Not because of it.
It did happen because of a conversation at somebody's home. They were talking about, forgiveness and stuff like that, and God, and it just, like, it dawned on me. I'm like, I haven't even talked to God about this situation. I just assumed that
this is what you had to do.
This is what I had to do to get right with God.
Yeah.
And so it never really felt like the work itself was what made me right with God. It was the conversation that I was willing to have with him about that.
So then when you left, how did people treat you? Like, you just couldn't cut it? Like, was that kind of the thing, or was it how did people treat you?
People didn't talk about it. I was nervous on the inside, but I was just like, I'm gonna go to meeting. Like, I went home after a gospel meeting that my coworker and I had on a Sunday, and I went home with my parents. So we were in my parents' field when I left the work, and I know everybody in that field. So that was really hard. It wasn't like I was over in Utah and I could, like, go 400 miles away and then never have to see these people again. So that was really difficult, but it wasn't like I was leaving the meetings. I just left the work. And so the following Sunday was a union meeting. And so it was not normally at my parents' house. It was somewhere else. Well, if I show up and nobody knows, like, they're probably going to be like, oh, well, Kayla's here to lead the meeting.
Yeah.
So I I just told my dad. I said, can you please tell him, the elder of that meeting, that I'm going to be there, that I want him to lead the meeting. And you don't have to say why, or you could tell him I left. I don't really care. I don't want it to be an awkward moment, like right before meeting starts, and like we're looking at each other like, are you going to? No, are you going to? So, and then from then on, I attended the gospel meetings that my ex-coworker and the helper coworker that was sent had, and people were friendly. I got one comment that wasn't even directly to me. It was relayed to me through another one of the friends. He got an email that said, what's wrong with Kayla? Do we know why she left the work? And that was it. It was not, like, nobody asked me. And I was, honestly, I was okay with that, because I think at the time, I'm like, I don't even know why, other than I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't take it mentally.
So how long was it then you left the work and then you guys met and got married?
It was about a year. because I left in September, and then I was trying to figure out what I needed to do. And so I worked for Starbucks, and then I worked for a temp agency, and then I ended up getting a job at the Children's Hospital in Denver. And I was working there when Ty and I started dating.
Okay. So, how did it feel to marry a worker, Ty?
Well, I certainly never planned to anyway, but I don't know. It was kind of funny to me because my older sister had also married someone that had been in the work, so it wasn't a totally new thing to me. But I don't know. Like I said, it was so unplanned that I didn't think too much about it. No, and it felt like it was meant to be, just the way it all worked out. But
all right. So now that we got that piece that you omitted in your story, or maybe I cut you off. I don't know. But anyways, it's really interesting to hear that experience for sure. So prior to that, we left off building up to when you moved onto the grounds.
yeah.
Yeah, so in 2020, there was this little thing that happened across the world that changed things, in my mind, almost like for the better. So with COVID, most meetings stopped for a period of time. And the meeting that we were attending was like 30 minutes away. And all older people who were all retired, and Ty and I were still in the workforce. I was working in the medical field, so I had to work. And with him working in the business he was in was oil and gas, so it's kind of, we were technically on the essential list or whatever. And we felt bad about, like, we were working, but this other group of people were not, and so we didn't want to. Well, I think it started off like they didn't really want to meet for like Wednesday nights or Sundays.
Well, like,
and
so
then we were like, well, we don't want to be around you in case we happen to catch COVID and then give it to them, right?
So this meeting is all out in rural areas, so they were still farming and ranching, but they weren't really around a lot of people, so it kept them kind of safe from getting COVID as far as they were pretty isolated. But we were around a lot of people, so we hated to bring it to them. So I don't know, I would say it was just kind of a mutual decision to kind of do our own thing for a little bit. So we started meeting with a cousin of mine that was living in Canyon at the time, him and his wife, and we just had our own little informal Wednesday night Bible study to start with, and then we started doing the same thing on Sunday, and we really enjoyed it because it gave us, we followed along with the normal Bible study list for Wednesdays, but it gave us a chance to really have a discussion about the study instead of just speak your piece and then move on.
It wasn't as much of a formal meeting.
No, not at all.
A Bible study.
It was also not like, the workers were not really aware that we were doing that either. Which, I mean, it didn't feel right or wrong at the time. We just knew that we wanted to get together and be a part of like the same studies and have fellowship.
Well, you were a worker, so you could have got away with it, right?
Well, it's funny. We were doing our own thing, and then it just kind of organically grew. A couple of the college kids decided they wanted to come join us, and then another couple from Canyon wanted to join. So before long, we had probably 10 people or more that were coming. And so then we decided, well, if we're all going to do that on Sundays, maybe we should do the bread and wine. So we just kind of decided to do that. Maybe I should have talked to the workers first, I don't know, but we did the bread and wine and everything. And afterwards, after it happened a couple of Sundays, the worker in our field, she asked us about if we were doing that, and I said yes, and I think she was a little surprised by that. And I mean, we didn't mean anything by it. We weren't trying to circumvent, the methods of determining whether or not we should have a meeting or whatever. But it was just kind of happened. But anyway, we did that for, I don't know, what do you you think, 6 months or something? I don't know how long it was.
I think regular scheduled meetings resumed in October. So, yeah, it probably was about 6 months.
So they didn't tell you they didn't tell you to stop.
No, she didn't tell me to stop. I think
Okay.
she was just surprised that we maybe took the initiative to do that on our own without asking. But it wasn't well, you shouldn't be doing that, you know.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, after that, I think is when she actually sent a couple more kids to our meeting.
Yeah. And I think there were a couple more in the area that, like, groups that kind of started doing something similar. For those that felt comfortable in doing so.
And so you had mentioned it was more like a Bible study kind of, or like I guess what we would call a Bible study outside of meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where there was discussion and things like that. And so how did that play a part in your thought process? And
So I would say that was the first time that not only us, but a lot of people realized that it wasn't the format of our meetings that gave us, you know, it didn't have to be the same format as we were used to be able to get something out of our time together. And in fact, for us, it was the opposite, you know, changing the format and allowing for more discussion and things like that really helped us to dig deeper into the scripture and things like that. And so it opened our eyes maybe that maybe we don't have to do things quite like we thought we did. And that was maybe the start of asking some other questions as to what could it be like, you know, outside of our normal.
But you're still in enough for a few more years and then moving on to convention grounds.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, it was almost like it did do more probably for my spiritual life than meetings probably ever had, just because we were meeting with people similar age. We were, so like our life experiences were similar, but also just this open discussion, and I don't know, it was very encouraging. And so like it was a really good time, I think, in our life, because we were very encouraged spiritually, and we were looking forward to moving to the grounds eventually. We still didn't have a date onto when that would be, but all of my growing up, I lived in the city, and from a very young age, I was like, I'm going to live in the country. Like that was a huge dream of mine, and to have like a milk cow and chickens and a huge garden and like all these kids running around, like that was a huge dream of mine. So there was a natural part of me that for sure, like I was so excited to be able to possibly live on a convention grounds that was in the country and it had all these things. I didn't really think too much about what it would be like to actually have a convention. I'm a lot more relaxed, I think, in my personality that way than Ty. Like I was just like, oh, that's fine. It'll, you know, it's only 4 weeks out of the year. Like I'm not too worried about that. Like I'm just excited that we get to be in a place that we honestly, with like this day and age, we probably wouldn't have an opportunity like that. And so everything was good. 2020 was a weird year, but spiritually I think it was a really good year.
This is really pretty.
Yeah, we enjoy it. So this is, I think they call it the Tool Creek Canyon. There's 3 different branches of the Tool Creek that come together, and there's that earthen dam over there. There's a lake, and so it would have flowed through this canyon here.
I'm sorry, I should have washed our windshield before we got out here.
That's right. So what I heard, Ty, is she wants a bunch more kids.
That's what she said then. I don't know if she's saying that now, but
a lot happened between 2020 and today.
but yeah, I mean, it. I would say I alluded to earlier that the path to the convention grounds was not a straight one, and so we. At that point, we had been married a couple of years, and I think we had already probably had one experience by then that we were unsure if we should stay in the area and continue to wait to move to the grounds, or if we should move out of state.
Oh yeah, that's where you left us off.
Yeah.
When we were at the house still.
And so, you know, it was one of those things where you ignore it long enough, sometimes it does go away for a while. But so, I mean, we were at a good place then, and then I would say within another year or so, we still weren't sure if we were going to move to the grounds in 5 years or 10 years or ever, you know, it just wasn't sure. And so we had at least one more experience where we just felt very strongly that maybe we should move out of state. And again, pushed that away, and we finally got a time frame of when we would be moving to the grounds, and so that was all great. But then it was right around that time that everything kind of broke loose with Dean Brewer, and so of course that really threw us for a loop. It was a really high and a really low all at the same time, and we can go into a lot more detail on what that looked like, just with everything going on with Dean Brewer. But we
I'll take the key.
yeah,
Sorry.
we were really looking forward to moving there, but yet really conflicted with the spiritual aspect of it all. You know, as far as the physical part of moving to the grounds, yeah, we were excited about living there, but with everything going on with meetings, it was really conflicting at the same time. For me, I think it bothered me a lot more to start with than it did her. It was a lot more shocking, I guess, to me than it was to her to start with. But
The Dean Brewer thing.
yeah, the Dean Brewer thing. And so we kind of started working through all of that and trying to reconcile how can we be okay with all of these things that we've learned and still move to the grounds. So we pushed through for, I guess it was in March time frame, I think, of 23 that all that started coming out, and we moved to the grounds in December of 23. We had a few months to work that out, but we had until June, I guess. The end of June is when preps were kind of coming up for Happy in 25 or 24. And for myself, I was still kind of struggling with just how do we have convention at our home and guarantee that everyone that's there is safe. It felt like a big responsibility. And my main concern was, you know, we had seen a lot happen from the Texas staff as far as like the guidelines and policies and things that had been worked on. And we'd done the listening tour that they did. And so some of the concerns we had, I would say, were eased at least. And we had a Zoom call with all of the convention ground owners in the state of Texas and New Mexico and some of the staff, and talked about some convention guidelines, things that we could do to help people feel like they would be safe and things would be dealt with accordingly. And so that helped some, but I still was concerned because I recognize that even if everybody involved has the best intentions, things can still fall through the cracks. You know, I had no way of knowing that somebody wouldn't show up that shouldn't be there, and maybe even the workers wouldn't be in the know. You know, maybe they wouldn't even know that this person shouldn't be there.
You guys were feeling the responsibility to make sure everything was okay at at convention. How big is Happy Convention?
It can be right around 1,000.
Yeah, so pretty
Typically.
big.
It's been, since COVID, it's been a little bit smaller. But I think there's been years we've been around 1,000. But so yeah, I mean, a lot of people to feel responsible for. And obviously, I mean, I recognize that, you know, if I went to another convention, I don't really expect them to be responsible for me, but you can't help but feel that way when it's like it's your home. It's like you were inviting everybody over for a get together at your house. You feel responsible. And so I decided before preps that I needed something to help me with my stress and anxiety leading up to that. And so I actually got on some medication for that, and that helped. It felt like kind of a necessary evil, I guess, in my mind. Like I didn't want to have to rely on something like that to be able to host convention, but I just felt like there really wasn't any other way. And
So, not to interrupt you, but if you think about that, and again, Kayla, you had mentioned mental health is a real thing, and there's help for that. There's counselors, there's medication and stuff. And so I don't want to come across that I'm saying that, but if just what you just said, that you had to get medication to help you get through having convention. Like, if you think about that, that's pretty crazy to think about now, isn't it?
It's kind of wild.
Yeah, it is. And go ahead.
Oh, okay. He touched on like this responsibility. Like, again, it's like nobody asked us to be responsible for that many people. You know, like convention is a fairly public thing, but until you've actually lived on a convention grounds, and maybe even there are some that live on a convention grounds and never feel that, but for Ty and I, like, it was a huge burden, just because of what we were aware of what already happened. And not only that, we had a 2-year-old, and like as a mom, like that was huge, having people in my home that I didn't know up until that point. After we heard about Dean Brewer, like we had just staff for the most part, the Texas staff stay with us, but this was going to be the first time we were going to have 7 strangers in our home that we didn't know anything about. And I put my faith in the staff. Like, that was the only thing I could do, was put my faith in them. Like, okay, you know these people. I don't know how well, but hopefully well enough that I'm letting them in my home.
Because usually the people from, what are they? Visitors, they call them, I guess, are the ones that stay in the home, right?
Yeah.
Typically the visiting brothers.
Okay.
And I actually had a conversation with Ty before the convention. I said, what do you think they would say if I told them I would only allow visiting sisters in our home? And he was like, I don't know, but we were too embarrassed to ask or something. I don't know. We didn't really feel like we could stand up for ourselves in that sense, like, even though that was our home, you know, but we felt like we couldn't rock the boat and change things. Like, again, as a people pleaser, so I had to do what has always been done. And even if that made me feel uncomfortable, or that made me feel a point where I didn't know if it was really right or wrong, it wasn't up to me to make that decision in my own home.
Anyway, I got on the medication to kind of help deal with the stress of it. And I know a lot of people would chalk that up to us being young. I mean, for a couple living on the grounds, we were young, probably a lot younger than most. But I don't feel like that's really, I mean, I don't think that's why it affected me more than it would anybody else. I don't think it had anything to do with age. It's just, I was aware of enough things at that point that I feel like it was a legitimate concern. But anyway, we went through with preps and convention, and really it went pretty smoothly. The only thing that happened during that time that I had an issue with was the fact that we had our speaker system had the ability to have a landline plugged into it, and they could do a call-in
Okay.
system for that. And we had just bought a brand new speaker system for convention that year, and so I had just spent a week helping get that set up and tuned up and had the call-in system ready, and I had bought a subscription to an app service to be able to host the call-in and all that, and I thought we were good to go. And then I find out Wednesday afternoon by a text that the call-in number and the password had been changed from what I had set it to. And it wasn't a question, hey, what do you think about this? It was, I just got a text, here's the password and the call-in number. And so immediately that was just a red flag to me. Like, what do you mean we've changed the call-in system already?
Well, yeah, because it was a brand new system, right?
Yeah.
So this would have been a brand new
Yeah.
password anyways.
Yeah. And not only that, but I had just previously given the number that I thought we were using to the staff. And so then I find out there's a different number. So I said, what's going on? And I was told that the decision had been made that we needed to control who could call in and who couldn't. And so then I decided I would talk to one of the staff, one of the brothers that I knew was probably behind that. And so we talked about it, and I expressed my concern about that, because the way I felt was, at this point in time, the last thing that someone who has an issue with what's happened in the fellowship, the last thing that we as those who are still, invested in it, would want is for it to appear like we have something to hide. And so to me, by blocking people from calling in, that's immediately what I would think if I was them, is, well, they don't
Lack
want
of
us to
transparency.
they don't want us to hear what they have to say. And so I said as much. I said, we shouldn't have anything to hide, and there shouldn't be anything said from the platform that anybody couldn't hear. I mean, and I still feel that way. If there's something that can't be heard by all, it shouldn't be said. Either it's true or it's not. And if what we're preaching is true and honest, there shouldn't be anything anybody can say against that. And if they choose to speak against it, that's their own prerogative, but at least you spoke what was true. So it just was concerning to me, and it gave off the wrong message. And it also put this form of control again back into the hands of the ministry, and took it away from the friends. And it, in no way did I feel like I was the one that needed to have the authority of who could call in or who couldn't.
Yeah.
I wanted it open to anybody who would call.
Yeah.
And so we agreed to disagree. That's what it came down to, because I was told either we're having our whitelisted call-in system or we're not doing a call-in at all. And so I chose to allow them to do that so that at least some people could call in, because I knew some of the friends in our area that would only be able to listen to convention if they could call in. So I did that for them, but that was just one of those things that kind of got tucked away for me that I had a problem with, and I still do. I still stand by that.
That doesn't seem right for sure.
I understand their concerns of people maybe twisting things they say or whatever, but I just feel like if you can't be open and transparent, then you're sending the wrong message. I think people will twist that more than they will just being open and honest about what you're.
They probably didn't want me to call in and record it. Is what.
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it.
So where are we at?
So we are at this is kind of our little picnic ground. This is a property that our family owns, and it's out in the Paladura Canyon. It's kind of a tributary canyon to Paladura, and we'll hike around a little bit more after we eat lunch, but we're down here. There's a natural spring, and we made a little picnic ground down here where we have cookouts and stuff. So
awesome. The little one's getting a little squirmish, so
Yeah,
time
we
to
can
get her out, huh?
yeah.
go cook some burgers.
Okay, so now we're hiking for a walk, off-roading in the buggy. You mentioned that you wanted to say something about Dean Brewer when that hit.
Yeah. So that was probably the first time where I had to come to this realization that, like, where my faith was. And it was not in God at that time. My faith was very much in man. My faith was in the fellowship. The fellowship was my foundation. Even though, like, for my whole life, and even when I was in the work, I preached about Jesus being our foundation. It's like, until you go through an experience like that, sometimes I think we can say one thing but not really believe it. So that was the first time I came to this, like, realization, and I did not like it. I did not like the way it made me feel, because I was 29 years old, and so for the majority of, well, at that time, all my life, basically I felt like I was believing, or what I had my faith in was a lie, because it wasn't in God. And so just unpacking kind of all of that was a huge process. And
what were you guys told all the way down here in Texas about Dean Brewer? Like, when you first found out?
So we actually found out from a girl that had left meetings, I guess because she was kind of plugged into some of these sites or groups of ex-friends. She was Facebook friends, I guess, with my older sister, and so she had posted something about it. I assume it was that original letter that was sent out by Dole Smith, I think it was. And so, of course, my sister, she talked to me and she's like, "Have you heard about this?" And I hadn't. And so I read it, and I talked to my younger sister, and she read it, and I just remember telling her, I said, I feel like this is something big, like this. It just feels like it wasn't another small event. Like it wasn't just a one-off thing. It just, immediately there was just something about it that it felt like it was there was much more to the story than just what we had read. And of course there was so much more that came out after that involved so many other people. But
So you found out you found out first by an outsider,
yes.
as we lovingly call them.
Yeah.
And then did the workers eventually tell you down here, or?
They did. I don't remember how long it took before there was a letter sent out. I think Lyle put out a letter, and I don't have anything bad to say about the letter or anything. It seemed like it was very, very transparent as far as what was relayed to the friends. That was as deep as it went, I think, was just Dean Brewer. It didn't
Didn't talk
cover
about
anything else. But
and I don't think anything else at that time it wasn't coming out quite like it has since.
yeah, I mean, that was pretty early on. But
Yeah.
since after that,
It's a little windy. It will hopefully be a little bit less down here, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit windy, that's all.
so obviously that was the first shock, and then it just seemed like every day there was more and more that was coming out, and the more that came out, the more it involved people that I knew, either victims or workers or elders that were being named. It just seemed like more and more people. I remember distinctly there was one email that I got from Wings one day, and I won't mention the name, but it was a worker that I really respected. Both of us did. And it wasn't that he had necessarily done anything wrong, but he was just involved with a situation that I didn't feel like was handled right. And it just really hit me because it just felt like him too. Like even this person has been aware of this kind of abuse going on and been involved in decisions that were made. And I remember I was out in the field stuck in square bells, and I just stopped what I was doing, and I called my dad, and I just said, what are we gonna do? I mean, that's the way I felt. It was just like I was having a heart attack. And I just said, what are we gonna do? He said, what do you mean, what are we gonna do? But to me, it just felt like, how could we go on? Like, it was summertime, convention was coming up in 23, and I'm just thinking, how can we go on? And I know a lot of people felt that way, and there was a lot of advocacy for pausing conventions and stuff so that there would be a time of reflection and sorting through all of this. And I think that would have been a great idea. But we know what would have happened if a bunch of people would have had time to really stop and think, to pause and consider everything they had heard. But instead, we just kept trudging through, you know?
Yeah.
As if everything was still normal. It wasn't. Anyway, I'll let Kayla talk about how she felt a little bit. But
Yeah, I think originally, like, the news was shattering. Because as I had mentioned before, like, my experience with going in the work and everything, the workers were, like, meant to be the best of us. And I know that's very unfair to say, and I agree. Like, now, it's very unfair to put that, I don't know if you call it responsibility or that kind of a title to them.
Well, a spiritual leader should have some responsibility and should
Yeah.
have accountability. So in
Yeah.
that regards, like, that's somewhat normal. I know
Yeah.
we elevated them much beyond that,
Right.
but
But yes, even just on a natural level, yes, if they are our spiritual leaders, why are these heinous things happening? And not only why is it happening, but why is it being covered up? And why are they allowed to continue to be in a place of importance and also be in a place where they can continue to do whatever it is that they're doing?
so you think it was probably a lot of the cover up just as much as all of the awful things that have happened are horrible, but then to cover it on
Right.
top of that.
Yeah,
Because
that's almost worse.
these
in my
horrible
mind.
things happen in anywhere, right? I was told, well, this happens in the workplace at places, and this happens in the Catholic Church, and this happens in
As if
XYZ.
somehow that makes it better.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, what really bothers
But-
me with that logic is,
And
on the
there's
one
no
hand,
logic.
well, on the one hand, we're not like anybody else, right? Like
Yeah.
we're different. We are not like every other church. But then when it came to the abuse,
all of a sudden,
almost the excuse was, well, this
well, we're
happens
like
anywhere.
everywhere else, so
And
it's like, well,
you know,
what is it? Are we?
the church next door would do it. It's like, well,
That's really interesting.
that's
I've never
not-
thought about that in that
we
way.
the way I feel is you don't get to pick both sides. You got to
Yeah.
pick one. Either you're not like anyone else or you are. And
Yeah.
what I've said is there's a saying that they use in science sometimes that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so if you're claiming something extraordinary, like being the only church, the only right way, the only true fellowship, the only true ministry, then you don't get to turn around the next day and claim immunity almost because you're just like everyone else. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
So
either are or you aren't.
Yeah, we're not like anybody else until it's bad,
Yeah.
and then we're like everybody else, and that's
Yeah.
why it's okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Forgive
Well,
us like you would
yeah, I
everybody
mean, I
else.
understand.
Overlook it like you would everybody else.
We're human, obviously, like
did you
everybody
guys
else, but
Drill or dynamite something? Look at this.
No, what it is. Oh well, I couldn't tell you what that is. There's actually quite a bit of those around.
It's
It's little
perfectly
Yeah,
round.
it is
sandstone,
perfect.
but there's a lot of
there's a
little
lot
shale
of
and sandstone here.
Up top, there's a lot of holes that are probably 8, maybe 12 inches deep that go down probably like 1 or 2 feet. And we wonder if it's where some of the natives would grind their grain or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really neat place. You never know what you're gonna find. So yeah, I came to a point where I had to realize where my foundation was. I remember speaking one time about walking on a rock, and it's actually perfect that we're kind of in an area where it's easily, you can picture it, but picture walking on a solid rock, but then there's just a little bit of sand or something on the rock, so your foot doesn't have like a perfect contact with the rock, so you can picture it very, very slippery. I always, like prior to Dean Brewer and all of this stuff coming out, I always pictured my foundation was Jesus, this rock, and that the little bits of sand and stuff were just like the little cares of life or little things that we can get caught up in, and those are the things that are going to cause us to slip. And then all of a sudden, I'm faced with this
I have to turn it around.
Okay.
It's a little steep.
this huge realization that I have been wrong my whole life. And that was, I don't know, it's probably fair to say that was nobody's fault but my own. But part of it might have been what we've been told and how we were raised and everything. But my foundation was the ministry. That was very, very clear. My foundation was in man, and in the the day that all this abuse started coming to light, it was like that foundation was just like ripped out, like a carpet just came out from underneath me.
Because like you mentioned before, it was, if this is the one true way, how come this is the fruit, essentially? Right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what you're questioning.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
questioning, this should be perfect. Like, I'm not saying that people have to be perfect, but
But there shouldn't be this level of
no.
abuse in
No.
something that is so extraordinarily
Yeah.
unique.
And we'll go with the term that everybody uses. Well, the way is perfect, but it's the people aren't perfect, but God's way is.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but what is the way? Are we talking about the ministry, this fellowship, or are we talking about Jesus?
So did you realize at this time that did you think, okay, I've been wrong, so, not that we know that we're saved when we go to meetings, because
Yeah.
we just, we don't believe you can know that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, but at this point when you're starting to see these things, did you think, wait a second, this is maybe not the only true way, and did you start to think, am I saved?
Yes.
Do I have a saved eternity?
Yes. Because around the same time, I began to realize, probably because God was trying to point it out, because I was desperately praying for some clarity on this, I began to feel like what I have believed in my entire life has been that we are saved through our works. And if that is true, then, well, I'm never going to be perfect enough. I'm never going to be able to say that I am worthy of salvation because I'm not perfect and I never can be. So,
Isn't that the key? Isn't that the thing that changes everything? When you realize that you can never be good enough. And I think deep down inside, we knew that going to meetings,
yeah,
and that's why there's so much anxiety and
Yeah.
all of that. But when you actually get to the point where you realize that no matter what, no matter how many meetings, no matter if I go into work or not, if I do all these things, I'm still not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
it's really interesting to me that so many older people, when they are on their deathbed, are still afraid to die. And Ty and I were just talking about that not that long ago. And it's like, well, because they've never had any assurance of their salvation in this lifetime. Because the only assurance that they've gotten is if you are a good,
Here, let me.
oh yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
No,
great
thanks.
if you don't mind.
but what's really odd is
We're gonna take a left here and kind of go off the trail
yeah.
to that swimming hole.
you should mention about the day after they
So,
die.
this isn't my thought. Somebody else mentioned this,
Here,
but
I'll get her.
so somebody that is on their deathbed, if you were to ask them or ask someone else if they were saved, most likely, oh, there's some deer down there.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you can catch them, but anyway, they would say that we hope so, but we just don't know. But then, if they died that day, the next day at their funeral, there would be assurance,
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over again. And it's, in my mind, the reason that we are so quick to make that assumption the day after they're gone is because it's like now we know for sure that they stayed faithful to the very end. And by faithful, we mean they never left fellowship. Because if they had, we wouldn't be so quick to say they do have salvation. We would be, well, we don't know, they lost out at the very end.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have anything to do with it. But
Well, and you mentioned somebody on their deathbed would say, I think anybody who goes to meetings would say, I hope I'm
Yeah.
saved.
I
Yeah.
hope I did enough, right? I
Yeah.
hope I was good enough.
Yeah.
Like there's no assurance of that. And it's like, I don't believe God wanted us to live our life that way. Like
Yeah.
questioning all the time, not having that assurance.
Yeah, we're not given the spirit of fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that verse. But she
Yeah.
mentioned about her foundation being in the fellowship, and I think that was mine too, but I wouldn't have admitted that even to
Oh,
myself
well,
before. I
no.
didn't realize that, but I think you have to be very honest with yourself to allow yourself to even throw that idea around, you know.
Mhm. Yeah,
because
it's not an
not
easy
comfortable.
thing
It's not.
to
It's
admit.
not easy to think that all this time I may have put my trust in the wrong thing. And for me, a big part of it was, it wasn't just trusting man, it was trusting in the fellowship, because that to me was a big key of it. Because we're doing things the right way, that's a huge part of why we have salvation and others don't, is because we're doing things the right way.
We think
So
we have
yeah,
salvation.
so you
Yeah.
take that all of a sudden and shatter it into a million pieces, because you see people who are even overseers that have been a part of this ministry for who knows how many years, and yet still have this much unresolved sin in their life. And you start to ask yourself, am I really living a life of overcoming or not? Is what I'm doing really, is there evidence of a power in my life? And I think that verse that talks about having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof, from such turn away, to me that's a big wake-up call to me. Is I had a form of godliness. I think anybody that would have been watching my life would have thought, for the most part at least, I was doing what I should be doing and living a Christ-filled life, I think they would have thought. But you know, at the end of the day, was there really a power at work in my life, or was it my own power? And I think it was my own power, because I've felt a change in myself in ways that I've never been able to find victory in things I've felt since leaving, because there has been a full surrender to Christ and the power that He has to change me, not myself.
Amen. Yeah.
But anyway, we might get her out of here so we can hike down to the swimming hole there.
Sounds good. All right. We dropped the baby off the cliff, and then I'm just kidding. She's sleeping. So
In parts unknown.
She's happy.
okay.
Yeah, I feel like things, because the first convention went fairly well, it was kind of this, or at least for me anyways, it was
Yeah.
like this sense of hope that like things would get better. And in some ways like that things would go back to normal, because like that's where we were comfortable, right? Before
Yeah.
we knew any of this information regarding Dean Brewer, but also before like some of the differences in doctrine kind of came along.
It's not comfortable to think about these things. It's
No.
not comfortable to wrestle with these things. So it's obviously we wanted to return back to homeostasis
Where there's
and
comfort.
and let it all die down, and we did try for a little
Yeah.
while. I guess.
Yeah, it seemed like, what was I telling you the other night? I guess it was this reassurance too from the staff, like that they would continue to inform everybody of anything going on, and it really did feel like things were changing for the better. And we were feeling hopeful. It felt good to get through our first convention. And
So this is the
I don't
same
know.
time you're kind of struggling with these thoughts, though, of, am I saved? Is this
Yeah.
the true way?
yeah, so it was right after that when I started really I started picking up on little things that were shared in the meetings, like, and I don't know, maybe it was always mentioned, it just seemed like blaringly obvious at that point that whenever outsiders were talked about, it was always like, they're not saved. It was always like prayers of, if anyone has a true and an honest heart, that God would bring them to the meetings. But doesn't that mean that anyone who doesn't have a true and honest heart, or everyone outside of the meetings, was not true or not honest. I don't know. It was like these feelings of like, well, I know people that don't go to meetings that are probably better Christians than I am, that have a greater faith in God than I do. And it kind of circles back to feelings that I had as a kid and that I had when I was in the work. Because it's like, I don't feel like this is the only way that God intended for people to believe. And I don't know, like we would hear a lot about, I guess some people use the term worker worship, but in our meetings it was a lot about like what other workers had said. And the meetings were not really a place where we felt like spiritually encouraged. It's definitely a place where you would go to feel like, well, we're in the right place and we're doing what we should be doing.
Exactly.
But I was spiritually starving. Now, a big part of that's on me because I needed to be reading more and praying more. And I know that was not just like it's somebody else's fault, right? But
Well, I don't know. You've mentioned that a couple times, and yes, we are personally responsible, regardless of our situation. However, the culture we lived in made it near impossible, and still does, to hear the true gospel.
Yeah, we weren't hearing the true gospel being preached.
That's true.
So I mean, the way I would characterize like time frame after that convention in 25 was for myself, it was like the stage of grief, I believe, is bargaining. One of them is bargaining. And so I feel like that's what I was trying to do was, can I find a way to still keep the homeostasis, not have to lose my identity, put part of myself to death to leave this thing, and still believe the true gospel and be able to feel free to speak about it and not have this clash of beliefs with those that I worship with. And it, for a while, I guess, I battled that, but then it finally got to the point where I realized it's just not possible for me to truly live in the liberty of Christ and still be a part of the fellowship. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, meetings became a source of anxiety, similar to that when I was in the work, because where we were going, I know that I disagreed with a lot of what was being shared, but I feel like I didn't have the freedom again to mention that.
And it's not that I don't want anybody to take it as a personal attack on the people that we met with or even the staff. It's not I don't see it as a personal thing, because I feel like at this stage, this many years since William started all of this, we're all as much a victim, if you want to call it that, of the doctrine and the mindset as anyone else.
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
I can't make it personal, and I don't want to make it personal.
Yeah,
I don't
true.
hold any vendetta against anybody or a grudge against anybody for what they believe. I just want everybody to know the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something I was thinking about the other day, and that is that, okay, leaving meetings is a result, generally. There's been a lot of people who leave because of the CSA and the SA stuff, and that's a perfectly fine reason to leave. But for those who are Christians or became Christians before or during leaving or after, it's a natural result of leaving is a natural result of becoming a Christian, because the doctrine is false.
Yeah.
And so why hang out where you're in false doctrine, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that quite the way that I had that thought, but essentially it's just a result of becoming a Christian, is you just leave because that's what happens.
Well, to me, it's like a conflict of spirits really. You know, I mean, we talked so much in meetings about being all of one accord or all in the same spirit and all that. And it got to the point where that clearly was not the case. I mean, driving to meeting was a dreadful thing. Something that used to be a joy and a place that I went for encouragement became the exact opposite. And it was, there was no doubt in my mind that there would be something said that I would disagree with. And it's not that we can't disagree with people and not be around them, but it's just you want to naturally be with others that have the like faith that you have. And I used to have that with the friends, but I don't have that anymore because we believe differently.
So when were you guys saved? Were you saved at the same time? Or do you have a moment that you can look back and say, this is where I realized the truth?
I don't know I don't think we've ever really talked about when that moment was. I think for me it would be difficult to pinpoint a moment. I think maybe it's two different things to say the moment you had faith and the moment you were saved. Maybe that's two different points. Because I think I had faith in God when I professed, but I don't think I maybe had salvation because I truly didn't understand who Christ was, and I didn't truly have faith in what he had done at that point until recently. But I couldn't tell you exactly when that moment came.
Yeah, I can't either. I firmly believe Scripture is clear that there can be a moment of, like, you can know the exact minute. I don't have that, and that's okay. You brought up a good point where you had faith in God, but you didn't understand who he was, and that's okay. We don't have to understand who God is to have faith in God, necessarily. But meetings teach a false Christ, and you had mentioned that a few times off camera. So explain to us how you realized who Christ is biblically and how that changed your faith.
So, you know, when you feel that, when you believe that Christ is this, I don't know really what I thought he was, if it was, you know, this half God, half man, or this man that was more like an angel than a man, or what he was exactly. But at the very least, you knew he was called the Son of God, and you believed that he lived a perfect life. And that, to me, was where the emphasis was his perfect life. And that seemed to be the most critical thing about him in his life, was what he lived, which was the perfect life. And it wasn't so much on who he was. And so when I finally realized that this is not just a man that was somehow able to pull off the perfect life, but this was God himself that put himself in human form, that suffered and was tempted in all points as we are, that was willing to let himself be put to death, that it was God on that cross for me. I mean, that's what really puts the power in the gospel, is that it wasn't just what he did, but who he was. That's what makes it. Yeah, that's what makes it so powerful, because when you realize that the one true God, the God of this universe, did that for me, it's personal, and it's a very, I don't know, if that doesn't inspire you to have faith, I don't know what will. But and then it instantly removes any of the works-based thoughts, because you know, if that was God, there's no way I could do what he did.
Yeah.
It's not even a question. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to live a Christ-like life, and that we shouldn't, you know, be sanctified, but it just takes the emphasis away from you, and all the glory from anything you've ever done away from you, and it gives it all to him, and that's where it should be.
And the works become the fruit of salvation. So you have salvation, and we believe that with our whole heart, and what's going to come forth from that then it's going to be like, okay, well, now you're doing this because you know you're saved, or now you're doing this because you love people as Christ loves people.
So you mentioned several times, Kayla, that you were a people pleaser, and I think most of us probably were, because we had to be. Like, that was kind of our way of showing. Anyways, so when you came to that realization that it's not of works, how was that for you?
It was huge. And I'll be honest, like, I'm still working on it. There's things that...
But it's not of works.
But
Just kidding.
yeah.
You're still processing.
She's working on not working on it.
I'm working on not working on it. Yeah, just because, you know, you live X amount of years, it doesn't matter how many years, but you live that long, feeling like you have to be better. Because the better you are, the more people will know that you are. It's not even so much that they'll know that you're saved, because that wasn't it, right? It was more like they know that you're a godly person. And
You're in good standing.
Yeah, good standing. As just a natural part of who I am and my personality, like, I was always really hard on myself. If I didn't get an A, like, I was pretty upset. You know, I just going through life, like, I expected myself to do better all the time. And I cannot describe how freeing it feels to know, like, that, like, when you realize that Jesus died for you and you have salvation, like, in this moment you can say that I am saved because of Christ. Like, how freeing that is, you know, because it's like, well, then, yes, our works are still important on some level, but that is not what's going to get you into heaven. And it's amazing, the feeling that comes with that, you know?
So freedom is a bad word for people who go to meetings, because they assume, okay, so you have the freedom to go sin and live a sinful life. So describe what freedom actually means.
Oh, man. Peace, joy. I mean, I can list off all the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Those are things that I thought I had before, but I don't think I've ever really known true joy or true peace. And I know we kind of discussed a little bit, like, of, like, these other aspects of the fruit of the Spirit. Like, I think there's still a work that God is doing within me and revealing those things. But that's what freedom is. And freedom is...
It's freedom from guilt, too, isn't it? Like,
and doubt.
Well, it says he that is free in Christ is free indeed. And I think it's like the difference between, you know, nowadays you have people in marketing talking about, like, a cage-free chicken, and what does that mean? Well, really, there's a definition for that. It means only so many square foot. If they have so many square foot, then they're actually free range. It's like, well, if you were to zoom out a little bit, they're still in a cage. And I think that's how our life was. We thought we were free, but we didn't know what freedom in Christ was.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about, now I feel free to wear pants, now I feel free to wear makeup, now I feel free to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, this is a freedom. I feel like my heart is, like, there's something within me that is no longer in bondage to man. And that is, this whole thing, it keeps pivoting around this idea that we cannot serve two masters. And for me, going to meetings, that was this part of, like, I am here to serve a fellowship, a ministry, a person, a thing that is not God. And if you're trying to serve God at the same time, there's always going to be a conflict. There's always going to be this war. There's always going to be a struggle. There's always going to be a battle. You'll hear about it. Any convention you go to, there's a struggle, right? Yes, there's a struggle that we have with the enemy of our soul, but I think there's a bigger struggle too. And that is the struggle of, who do you have your faith in? Who do you serve?
Right?
Yeah. And let me be the first to say, when you leave meetings, like, you are leaving a total, like you're leaving your identity behind.
Mhm.
And that's not comfortable. It's not easy. But like we get to discover who we are in Christ and
Amen.
and who we are, like freedom from bondage.
I've said that I didn't really understand what it means to die to self until we left meetings, because you do put yourself to death. That old you is gone. I've heard that from family that, they miss who I used to be, but that person is gone. And I don't want him back.
Yeah.
I would not trade what I have found in Christ for anything.
Mhm.
It has been the new life that we have found in Christ is incomprehensible. And it doesn't mean that there's not still, still struggles in life. It doesn't mean there's not days when you don't necessarily feel joyful or whatever, but there's the peace that you have is beyond understanding, because despite any circumstance, there is something deep down that is your assurance of salvation, that it doesn't leave you no matter what the circumstance is. It's just like Job, no matter what happened, he still did not curse God, because he knew he had something that was way down inside that to me is just like this peace that we have in Christ.
In the King James Version, the only time the word struggle is mentioned is when Jacob and Esau were in the womb. Like there was a struggle. And I've always been glad to think about that, like our first and second born nature struggling. So really, if that's the only real struggle in life, like spiritual struggle we should have, why are we struggling with other Christians? Or other ones that believe and maybe are claiming to be Christians? Like, that's not where our struggle should be.
We wrestle not with flesh and blood.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
We
We shouldn't be at war with our brethren. And yet we found ourselves in a place where it felt like we had to almost like despise other Christians. And that never set right with me. Like I didn't feel right about that. And I'm glad to say now, I'm like, no, I was wrong in ever thinking that anyone outside of meetings was not a Christian or was not saved. And I don't know.
I've been told that, like in conversations about some of these things, that, well, you used to believe that too, as like an argument for whatever it is we're talking about. And my response is always, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
I did believe that, and I was wrong. And it doesn't pain me to admit that. I mean, it pains me that I believe that, but I think there's so many things that if we can get to the point where we can admit that we were wrong, and if we can open our minds, I think that's a scary thing for the friends to do, is to open their mind, because then it just seems like all we've heard is that the enemy's right there. I mean, he's just waiting for you to open your mind, and it's a lot of times it's not. That's not how it is. I mean, it's like God is just waiting on you to knock, to seek, and he wants to show you. But if your mind is closed off, you're not going to get anywhere. If you just rest in your own biases and your own little echo chamber, it's not gonna. You're not ever going to learn anything new. But
I think one of the most heartbreaking things, there's probably several, but one of the most was like when we left meetings, is that the comment was made to someone close to us that there was nothing out there for us. And I don't know, just like that really just broke my heart. Because first of all, it's like somebody that has never been outside of the meetings. But
He was a worker that said that, right?
yeah. But also it's like, what do you mean there's nothing out there for us? Like, God is out there.
Yeah. Amen.
we
Yeah,
can
it's not-
testify that there is so much
there is.
out there.
And for anyone who feels like they're on the fence, it's like, I know it's daunting and it seems scary, but it's like God is there. I promise you. Because I felt him, and I do. I feel him every day. And
Yeah, I think the workers just equate leaving to jumping into another religion. often.
Mm-hmm.
And since they're the only true way, then there isn't anything else out there,
Yeah.
right? But you're right, it's not about that at all. I mean, it's great to find a fellowship that you can get plugged in with and have fellowship with fellow believers,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what it's about. It's about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, she was talking about God is out there. Circling back a little bit in the story, a relative of mine, Darren Hartman, he and his wife had left the meetings probably a year before we did, maybe a little more. And at this point, I was in the bargaining phase. And this was after the first convention, and we were trying to make things work, and I hadn't really been trying to listen to any new information that was coming out or anything. And my mom mentioned an interview that Laura Bryan did with Whitney Nelson on CCF, and so I went and watched it, and I don't know, just kind of opened it all back up for me again. But
Some
I
would
felt-
say it stirred you up.
yeah, I felt like I should reach out to Darren. I'd been thinking of him quite a bit before that because I knew they had left, and I didn't know why. I'd never asked him. So I texted him, and I just told him, I want to hear your story. Like, I'm not gonna judge you for it or anything. I want to know what it was.
And this is when you were still going to meetings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so he texted me right back, and we scheduled a call, and I'll give him credit. I mean, the first thing he said was, "How much do you know?" And at the time I said, "Well, I feel like I know quite a bit." He was talking about what had happened, things that had happened. How much do you know about it? And I said, "Well, I think I know quite a bit of it." And he said, "Okay." He said, "I just don't want to tell you too much." He said, I don't want to, sway you one way or the other. I want you to make your own decision." And so I'll give him credit for that. But I didn't know the half of it. I thought I knew quite a bit, but there was so much more that had happened that I had no idea. But one of the sad things about me reaching out to him was I was then, and I still am to this day, the only person that has reached out to him in that way to ask him why, without any reservations. And it is strange how few people want to know why you left. I think there's more that are very slightly curious that might probe at you a little bit, but I think there's more that are more interested in talking with you to try to change your mind than there are to really hear what it is you have to say, what changed.
The first thing is that they want us to know that they love us. Like, that's always the first thing. Well, it's never, well, why did you leave? Or what was it? It's like, I just want you to know we love you. And it's like, that's fine. I'm glad you do. But
That's not why
it's
we
like
left.
they don't want to know the hard stuff.
Yeah.
They don't really care why we left. They just want us to come back.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay, so you guys were what I would call royalty. And I don't know if you would call yourselves that, but you were in the work. Your family owned a convention grounds, and then you guys moved onto the convention grounds, which elevated your status to a higher level than just a normal friend. And whether you want to admit it or not, it's true. But anyways, so and also that you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
And you still are.
well,
At least
he
you
is.
are.
I am.
You're the
Almost out
cradle
of the
robber,
20s.
but- So how did you leave? So we've kind of led up to that, and we kind of skipped over to the freedom that you have now. But bring us back to when you decided to leave and how that all played out.
Well, you were the one that found out.
So I mentioned Darren Hartman, and I talked to him before this and asked him if he was fine with me throwing him under the bus, but
Which he is. He
Yeah,
said
he
he
is.
was okay with that.
But yeah, I give him a lot of credit because he really was a big help to me working through a lot of this. I can't tell you how many hours we spent on the phone. I mean, it would be well over 100 hours that we've spent talking on the phone. But he's a survivor himself, and so because of that, he was aware of a lot more things that had happened than I was, and he was very willing to share a lot of his own story and things that he's been able to overcome since then. And so he mentioned one of the things that I had not heard about yet, and that was what people call the Baldwin babies. And by talking about this, I don't want this to come across as me trying to be insensitive to anyone who is a Baldwin baby or that had a Baldwin baby. But the reason I bring it up is because it was very shocking to us, and it also is something that I don't think very many people know about.
So give the 30-second,
Yeah.
unless your story goes into
No,
more detail.
it's not.
Give the
too deep.
30-second description of what a Baldwin baby is.
Sure. So, just a brief summary would be that there was a period of time, I think 30 plus years, where a doctor by the name of Dr. Baldwin,
And he was one of the friends.
Helped facilitate the giving away or giving up of children by their biological mothers to be adopted by couples that were some of the friends because of pregnancies out of wedlock and things like that. And so
he was kind of in a clean-up appearance
yeah.
doctor. I mean, that was his job.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, that's really what it was about, in my opinion. It's not about whether the mothers were capable of raising the children. Had nothing to do with that. It was about appearance.
And a lot of those babies were the result of workers abusing these women. And
So they were worker babies, too.
Yeah, some of them were. Some of them
weren't. I mean,
with
some were just
people who weren't
boyfriends or
one of the friends, or things like that. But regardless, it was about protecting image, protecting reputation of a family. We can't let people know that something like this is happening, and so we would rather. In simplest terms, force people to give up their kids than to let their image be tarnished. And so that's, I know a lot of people don't like the word cult, but to me that was one of the things that felt more like a cult than anything else, was that there. And so that was kind of a last straw for us, just to realize that something like that had happened, not just once or twice. We're talking a lot. And even people I know were Baldwin babies that I didn't know were Baldwin babies until then.
And if you guys haven't heard about that before, I don't know if this was specifically a Baldwin baby. I think it might have been, but maybe not. But I do have an interview with Lorraine Kronk that shares her story of the workers trying to take away her baby. So
sure, and there's
others out there.
yeah,
There's a lot.
Melanie
So-
Williams shared her story with
Yeah.
Whitney, and that's great. I would highly recommend you watch that.
That was recently,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah, I was 8 months pregnant when I heard about that, and I think I cried for days. To be in like any one of those young ladies' position, like I don't even have words for it. But that was the last thing where I said, no, I can't not longer be a part of the fellowship. And yeah, probably 90% of the people or more maybe don't know about it. So
I'd
it's
never
kind of
heard of it.
unfair. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I can't be a part of that.
And it's not to say I don't believe that this is still going on today, but it's just another thing that I can't ignore, and that's one thing I wouldn't mind mentioning is I want people to stop and think about the difference between forgiveness and forgetting. I have no problem forgiving people for things that I disagree with. I can forgive people for the abuse that they've done, but that doesn't mean I have to forget it. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to take actions in the future to keep you from being able to make that mistake again. And so I think there's a disconnect there in people's minds between forgiveness and forgetting, and they want everyone to forgive and forget. And that would be great, but we don't live in that reality yet. There will be a day when former things will be passed away and there won't be a remembrance of those things, but that day isn't yet. And so I think it's important that we realize that there are consequences for our sin in this life, even if we have been forgiven of it. I've heard the example, and I think it's a great way to look at it, is that you can choose to be an alcoholic and one day stop and quit drinking for the rest of your life, but you may still have to deal with the consequences of sclerosis of the liver because you were an alcoholic. And it doesn't mean that you are not forgiven of that, but there's still consequences. So that's why I feel like I have to take the stand that I have, because I cannot allow these things to happen to my own family as far as the abuse is concerned and things like that. It's not that I want to rub people's nose in what they've done. It's not that I don't forgive them, but there just has to be boundaries. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that I wish everybody who goes to meeting would hear. That just because you're forgiven doesn't mean that there's not consequences and that you don't forget.
Yeah. If I have a DUI today, I got to pay the consequences for a long time, even if I never do it again.
But that doesn't change the fact that you've forgiven somebody or you've been forgiven.
Yeah.
But there's still... And do you know how dangerous it is to forget? Like, if we just forgot everything bad that's happened, how dangerous that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, think about the things that we learn as a child that protect us from like falling off of a cliff. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't last very
we
long.
wouldn't last very long.
Well, I remember a testimony of one of the friends shortly before he died of cancer, and I've talked to his daughter since about it because I think there was some backstory there, but he mentioned in his last testimony that he was very thankful that God had the ability not only to forgive but to forget. And I think he's right. He is the only one that can truly put our sins as far away as the east is from the west. We don't have the ability to do that. If we say we do, we are willfully blind. We can forgive for sure, and I think we need to forgive. And I want people to know that just because we left meetings does not mean that we don't forgive the things that have happened.
So by this time, your eyes are wide open. What was the process of leaving? Being that you were living on a convention grounds and knowing that this was going to have more effect than somebody else who leaves.
So I was kind of willing to just stay. So this was like April last year. So April of 25. And like I told Ty, I said, well, we don't have to say anything until after convention. Like, just make it easy. People don't have to, like, they don't even have to make the decision of whether there's going to be a convention or not. But I know Ty was not. He was like, I don't even want to go to the next meeting. You know, once we really did agree that we're gonna leave.
So you decided to leave before convention even started.
Yeah, in 25. Yeah, for me, there was a point where it was just like a switch flipped in my mind that I was done. I just could not do it anymore. And so I set about trying to... I knew we couldn't just leave with no explanation, and because of the grounds and family involvement with that and everything, I knew it was not going to be a simple thing to leave.
It wasn't
We
going to be
couldn't just-
quietly either.
Yeah, we couldn't just
Unfortunately.
leave and stay living on the grounds because that would mean no more convention. And I don't personally own the property, my family does, and
I don't think
so
they would have let you do that anyway.
so that wasn't really an option. Now I could have made a lot more of a scene than I did.
And
But-
we technically were living there. We just were not in our home for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We let them have convention. I went and stayed with my parents for 3 weeks, and Ty stayed at an extra bunkhouse.
So that had to get people thinking, though. Like, what's
It was-
going on?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
weird. I wouldn't have done it again. 'Cause-
So, okay.
Well,
I mean,
backtrack
yeah,
just a little bit. We skipped over what we actually did.
Oh.
but just to clarify, you were there for one full convention,
Mhm.
and then you were living there for the second one, but you weren't actually there.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead and go back to
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
went to.
So, like I said, there came a day where I knew I was done with it. So I tried to come up with a letter to give to the friends and to the staff to explain why we were leaving. The first one was 19 pages long, and it's pretty well covered everything I wanted to say, but I knew I couldn't send that out. It was, at that time, I think I was hurting a lot more than I am now, and so
It was very
it was just,
raw.
yeah, it was very raw,
Mhm.
and I knew, when somebody's wounded, they lash out. That's just nature, and so I knew I didn't want to do that because, like I said, it's not personal. So I worked on trying to revise that down, and I eventually did, to like a 2-page letter or something, and
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good.
I cut out a lot.
I thought it was just a page,
Um,
but I guess it was 2.
Anyway, so when we finally decided that we would leave, I sent that in an email to the worker that was in our field and asked him to share it with the staff. And I sent it at night, and I didn't get a response for a while. So it was a little nerve-wracking for a little while, just wondering what they were going to say. But it definitely took them off guard, I'm sure.
Maybe I missed this, but what's the timing? When did you send it?
This was in April, like first week of April.
So, convention's in June? July?
Well, so preps would start end of June.
Okay.
It's the end
Convention's
of April.
second.
Okay, so this is your
in
second, this
July.
would be your second convention. You send them a letter in April.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Prior
like
to
the end of
convention.
April.
End of April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had went to Wednesday night meeting, and I sent it out that night after we got home. And then I left a letter. I gave an actual printed out copy that was more or less the same letter, but a little bit more tailored to our meeting. I gave one to everybody in that meeting. But that was, I guess that was the last one. Was that Wednesday?
What was really weird is like the lack of response directly to us. A lot of people reached out to like our parents, to my brother, like to other people, but like they didn't come to us directly, which I thought was really weird. And maybe in the moment, like we weren't really willing to talk about it because it was so raw. But looking back, I do still think it's very odd. Like some people still really haven't even asked. Like it just, I think we just died and we're no longer around.
Darren described it as he had lived in this small town all his life, and he said he felt like there was a funeral for him and no one came. And it's like he's still dead in his own community that he grew up in, which is so strange. But I do want to take a minute just to acknowledge that there were a lot of the Texas staff that did reach out to us afterwards,
there were.
and there were a lot of kind texts that were sent, and so we do appreciate that. And it wasn't radio silence from them as far as like Lyle offered to come and and visit with us shortly afterwards, and I declined, and I want to say the reason that is because like I said, we were still very raw emotionally about all of this because we were so hurt. And I didn't want it to turn into an argument. And I hope that they understand that. When it's something that is so important to you, so close to your heart, and it's such a big part of your life, you're invested. It's hard not to let it really, really emotionally affect you. So I knew there's no way that I can criticize something about the doctrine or the ministry without them taking it personally, because they're part of the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So it just didn't seem like the wise thing to do, to try to have a conversation when I knew I might say something I'd regret,
Yeah.
So I hope they understand that. It wasn't personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you, Kayla, said that you lose your identity, and that's completely how I felt. And I actually knew it before I left.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was so hard for me to leave, is because you know that everything's going to be gone.
Yeah. Yeah,
But-
go ahead.
So also, not only was everything raw, you're now trying to figure out who you are, your new identity in Christ, like you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just need time
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
for that.
Well, and we were also trying to figure out what we were going to do because we knew we had to move.
Yeah, that
And
added another
we
layer
were
of-
at a home that we expected to be at for a very long time. So we weren't
And
exactly
convention coming in a few months.
prepared to go out and buy a home. And anyways, there's a lot more to that, but it's like
Had a baby that was born.
we had a baby that was
2
born
weeks
in
before.
April of last year. So we had a lot going on. So yeah, it's a difficult time. Any one of those things is difficult, but to give up an identity. My sister was the first one that mentioned that. I talked to her sometime in March before we left and was just kind of telling her a lot of what we were feeling. And she was the one that actually first mentioned that term, you feel like you're losing your identity. And I was just like, yes, that's exactly it. So yes, you do kind of feel like you're losing it prior to even leaving because you don't know how it's going to go. Like, I had some really good friends that were going to meetings. I didn't know if I would lose them as my friends or not. I didn't. I know that's not everybody's story. A lot of people it's radio silence. They're cut off. But so I didn't know. Like, I didn't know if I was going to still have my friends on, the other side. Or I didn't know how my relationships were going to be, on the other side. So that sounds like
our child.
our baby.
All right, so we're not going to subject the viewers to listening to us huff back up the mountain. So we'll finish up when we get back up to that. Okay, so I think we're re-winded after hiking up the hill. And yeah, I guess we just kind of left off that, I don't know what I meant. That's all I'll find out really in a hurry, but I think we were talking about just leaving, I guess.
So we just wrote the letter, sent that out,
Yeah.
and then I guess I talked a little bit about the response from some of the workers and friends, and so I don't know. I guess we hadn't talked much about what life's been like after the meetings, but
So that was pretty much the end. Like, you sent that letter,
yeah,
you left for convention for that couple weeks,
yeah,
and then you came back until you could find another place to live, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so what has life been like after leaving meetings and when you've come into this knowledge of the true gospel, the true Christ? How has that been since then?
I mean, it hasn't been a walk in the park, for sure. I think to anybody that's thinking about leaving, it's not an easy thing to do, and there's going to be a lot of hard days, but like we talked about, the peace that you have from God is is something that's deep enough that even in those hard days, you can still keep going. But we've had people that we've reacquainted ourselves with, that are family or friends that we, maybe we rarely talk to because of the boundary of them not being the friends and us being the friends. So we've been able to rekindle a lot of relationships with people. It's been very helpful. So I would highly encourage you to find somebody that you can talk to that's either been through leaving or has. Most importantly, I would say you need to find people that have a true relationship with Christ outside that you can talk to, that can help you to I guess, silence the doubts that are in your mind, because there will be a lot of times when things that you've heard over the years will come back to your mind to haunt you in a way, just these little one-liners that are meant to shut your mind down and corral you. They will come back up, and so you need people to help you get through that. But we rekindled a lot of relationships. We were able to finally, after months, we've started going to a local church that is a non-denominational church, and that's been a wonderful experience. One thing I'll say about the non-denominational thing is I remember the first time I ever heard the term non-denominational, it was confusing to me. I was in high school and I heard a girl talking about this church she started going to, and I thought, what do you mean non-denominational? Like, do they not even know what they believe? Like, the denominations know what they believe, What do you mean non-denominational? But it's been great, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to a denominational church, but for myself, I think it's been good to not put myself into a box again, and sign up on a team. That's what it feels like when you choose a denomination. You could say it's like choosing a team, and it's hard not to pit yourself against other people, compare yourself to what they believe and all those things. And instead, I feel like what we've been able to focus on is our relationship with Christ and encouraging others and being encouraged by others. And not once have I felt like I've spent any time judging the people that are there, what they wear, what they, I watch them come in, and all I see is just people that want to come learn about God and have fellowship with other believers and worship God. It doesn't even occur to me to people watch the way I used to whenever people would come into a gospel meeting or a convention, and I'm wondering, well, it's been a while since I've seen them here, or what are they wearing, or there's none of those thoughts, and that's a great thing. And that's on me. I'm not saying that that's something wrong with the fellowship necessarily, but that's me.
It's common. I mean, that we all did, because we judge the book by the cover all the time. That's how you could tell if we went to meeting or not. Was the outward appearance. So.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll let Kayla chime in on that.
Well, and if your works are what prove how close you are to God, I mean, a lot of times it is an outward appearance type thing. Like, you can tell how righteous somebody is by what they're wearing or what they're doing, or if they make it to meeting every week. And it's like, I don't know, like I'm disgusted with myself for ever having judgment on those that didn't make it out, to every gospel meeting, or those that wore their hair a certain way, or, it's like, if I could just shake my prior self and be like, why? Why do you feel that way? But
so I have a question for you, Kayla, and if it's an inappropriate question, just tell me.
Yeah. And
if it's insensitive, tell me. But you have experience with being a worker, and you have experience with being a mom.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think, and maybe you've had conversations with older sister workers or whatever, but knowing that they'll never have that opportunity to be a mom. And God's design is that you get married and you have children. I mean, that's essentially. So, did you ever think that when you went into work, like, man, I'm going to miss out on this big part of life? Or, like, for those sister workers in their 70s or 80s, they'll never have that experience. Was that ever something you thought about?
Really, it wasn't. And I'm kind of surprised. I think when I offered for the work, I remember just being bummed that my parents might not get grandkids.
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking much about myself at the time, but I was 22. So it's like, I can't speak for somebody that's in their 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, and certainly getting to a point where it's past, like, they would be able to have kids. I mean, being a mother is not easy, but there is so much that God has shown me of himself through being a parent that I don't think you can get that anywhere else. And I understand there's some people that can't have kids, and may never experience that for other reasons, not just because they're like celibacy or something, but I am very, very, very thankful for my experience as a mother. And like, I don't know how often Ty and I say, like, man, do you think God just looks down and just wants to shake us? Like, sometimes he's like, you know, because of experiences that we have with our kids, where it's like, I just want you to understand, or like, why are you not listening, or, you know, little things like that. It's like, you can kind of get an idea of that by just watching other people interact with their children. But when it's your child, it's, it really is like God revealing his heart to you. So, and I don't know, I really haven't thought too much about maybe what the workers are missing out on, but I do know that it is a wonderful thing to be a parent. It's not easy, but it was God's intention.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up, because that to me is a huge thing that since leaving, I feel like has been so apparent to us. Also because of this time in life, we've got young kids, and so we're going through being parents. But it's just become more clear to me that I feel like now it is so important that those who are in positions of leadership in a church or a body of believers are married and do have children, because
Yes.
I think there's a reason that those things were written in Timothy and Titus, because like it says, if you can't rule your own household, how can you take care of the household of God? And it's not that it may not be possible for you to be qualified, but there's so much that you learn from being a parent. There's so much that you learn from being responsible for the well-being of a family that teach you the heart of God and teach you how to be a shepherd of your family, and therefore you're qualified to be able to do that for others. But when you haven't ever experienced that, you're just going off of your own reasoning. You're going off of just guessing what feels right to you, but you've never had the experience yourself. So I think it really has changed how I view qualifications for elders and bishops and things like that. It's just made it more real to me that there's so much about God's nature that I didn't understand until being a parent. I don't think you can understand in full measure what the love of God is like unless you have experienced what it's like to have that kind of love for your own children. It just makes it that much more real.
Yeah, especially after you see how many times they mess up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, and that's a reflection of us, you know.
Yeah. You learn what grace is, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Long-suffering, patience.
Okay, so my battery is almost dead. It's red, so that means we have a few minutes left. What advice do you have for people who still go to meetings, or for maybe friends or family that might be watching this? And what do you want them to know? I mean, you've covered a lot of good things, like, you haven't left God. You didn't leave meetings and leave God. You found God and left meetings. But what is some advice, and what's something maybe you would want somebody to know?
Mine would actually be more of a question, I think. Just like a reflection question. Because it's a question I've had to ask myself, like, throughout this whole process. And that is just, like, where is your faith? Like, is it in God or is it in man? Because for me, so much of my story is because my faith was in man. And I think as far as advice goes, I would just say trust God. He has been with us throughout this whole process. And looking back, like, I know he was with us long before we even had a struggle. I mean, he was there. And he's still with us today. And, like, he is so faithful. And we just need to be doing, like we need to be faithful back, to him. And I don't know. I just encourage you to ask yourself that question, like, where is your faith? And to let it be in God, because God is good.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's, let it be in God alone.
Yes.
Not in, I trust God, but I still trust my works for part of it.
Yeah.
There's a verse in the Book of Mormon. Anyways, it says something along the effects of, do all you can do and then God will do the rest. Jesus paid the price after you do all you can do.
Oh, no.
But that's completely against Scripture.
Yeah.
It's faith in Christ alone, and not trusting in 1 ounce of your works. So where is your faith? That's extremely important.
I would say, I guess my hope for people that are still watching, or that are still in the fellowship but are watching this, particularly men, is I hope that you would be willing to open your mind, not to the world as we are scared to death of, but open it up to what the Scripture really means, what it says, what God says about it, and be bold. I think it scares me how few people are bold about their faith. It really, I've heard that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And I think that's so true. And we read about those that were lukewarm in Revelation. And I think, to me, that's what apathy is. It's like you don't care enough to do something about it. And I think that's where I could not stay, is in a place of complacency, in a place of knowing but not doing anything about it. And so I would challenge you to be bold. If you have a conviction that something is wrong, be bold enough to take a stand about it. It's one thing to say that you don't approve of something. It's another thing to actually be willing to remove yourself from a situation because you have to prove your faith by your works. We can say that we don't agree with something. We can say that we disagree on a point of doctrine, but we have to be willing to actually make the choice to take a stand for it. And I just hope that more people will do that. It's inspiring to see people that have been willing to lose everything that they have, every person they've ever known, every relationship they have, their livelihood, to stand for what they really believe. And when you do understand the true gospel, it's worth that. You're willing to make that sacrifice. And like Darren Harbin shared with me when we were close to leaving, he said it is a trust fall, but he will catch you, and he's right. It is a trust fall.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that's a good point. Being willing to let everything go for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
Relationships. And it's not that we want that, right?
No, not at all.
But it's a reality that that will happen because of what we were raised in. And that's what makes it hard. But looking back now, you guys have been out of meetings for about a year.
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I'd do it 100
absolutely.
times over, and it has not been smooth sailing, but
There's a lot of times we wonder, like, because we really did question at one point, we're like, if we have these thoughts, like, we don't have any business moving on a convention ground, like,
Sure.
So there's times where I know we considered leaving, prior to even moving to the grounds. So there's times now where it's like, man, I think it would have been easier if we had.
Okay, so the battery died. If you've watched any interviews with us, it happens every time at some point in the conversation. But it's the evening now, and we've had a great day of fellowship and visiting and all sorts of fun stuff, and really good pizza for supper. But we're just going to kind of finish up. And there's a few things, kind of odds and ends that we've thought of, and so I wanted them to share some of that with you. And so, I don't know, you took some notes or something. Hopefully you remember what we were going to say, but...
A few things. So, just a few random things that I wrote down leading up to this that I thought was worth mentioning. There's a man that has done some interviews and different videos and things. He has the ministry. Wes Huff is his name, but in an interview that he did recently, he mentioned his own story, and he talked about how he was raised believing in God, and he had faith, but when he graduated high school, he thought that it was probably worth investigating other major religions, because he just thought, I don't want to miss something. If there is any other truth out there, I want to know. And so he did, and obviously he came back to the conclusion that the God of the Bible is the true God. And so one thing he said that I feel like resonates with me, he said, believing a lie, even if it's a convenient lie, is still not worth believing. And I wanted to follow what was true. And so that's why he went on that path. Because even if what he had believed all his life, which would have been convenient, even if that wasn't true, it wasn't worth following. So I guess that's how I would hope that I would approach my life, is I want to follow what's true. So I think it's important to seek that out. But another thing he said was that if Jesus is just a pattern, then you don't need a savior. You just need to pull up your boots a little tighter and try harder. And
That's good, isn't it?
I think that's very true. He said we're saved by works, but it's not our works. It's the works of Christ.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to we're not saved by our works. But anyway, I guess one other little thing, a little unrelated, was just thinking about what Saul, it says that he did when he was converted. It says that he preached Christ in the synagogues, that he is the Son of God. And to me, it's like that's what the message was. That's what his focus was. He wasn't preaching about a fellowship. He wasn't preaching about a format, anything else. His message was Christ is the Son of God. And so I thought, to me, that should be what we feel the gospel is that it's about who Christ is and what he's done. And that is that God himself has sacrificed himself for us.
Yeah, keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's about all I wrote down.
So, Kayla, you mentioned that after you decided to go to work, or they accepted you, there was a waiting period there, and some things happened during that time. So what was that?
Yeah, we were just talking, getting ready for supper, and I was remembering the night that I offered for the work. I was wearing this like bright orange dress, and it was modest. Like there was nothing wrong with it, but it definitely didn't look like something a sister worker would wear. And in the moment, I didn't think about it, right? I'm just having this conversation, and then I do remember, like, after the fact, though, I was like kind of wondering if they would accept me because I didn't look like a sister worker. So there was a little bit of a waiting period. It was about 6 months or so before I started in the work, and I gave away pretty much most of my clothes to different friends and my sister and stuff, and then I bought all new stuff that was a little more sister workerly, little longer skirts, little I don't know, more coverage on the shirts and stuff, and lots of scarves. I was pulling up some of my pictures from when I was in work, and I went a little crazy on the scarves, but it was just...
That was an acceptable accessory.
It was to
Yeah.
accessorize and to feel like fashionable, I suppose, in some ways, and like bright colors and funky patterns, but there's nothing wrong with scarves. But I do remember this, like, well, it's not so much in the moment that I felt like I had to conform, but like looking back at it, like that's what we were talking about. It's like there was this period of time where even though I didn't feel convicted that dress was anything inappropriate, or that it wasn't whatever, like, but I just knew that it didn't look like what a sister worker looks like. So, and in my mind, these other clothes that I had bought did. So, yeah, it was an interesting period of time.
Yeah. Again, I hope that anybody watching this, I guess that is one thing I'm thinking of now that I would like to mention. I don't want it to come across that we feel like now that we have all the answers and we know more than the friends know, or we figured out, so much more, or we think we know more, or whatever. I had the thought the other night that it feels like the more I understand, the less I know. And there was a time when I felt like I knew so many things. I knew so many things about what the scripture meant. And to me now, the more I understand, the more I realize that there's so much that we can't possibly know for certain. There's only a few things that we can be for sure about, and those are the things that we need to focus on and be sure in our stance on that. But the rest, if we are so dogmatic about certain things that really have no weight, we end up dividing ourselves from the other parts of the body of Christ, and that's not what God intends. So it's been strange to maybe unlearn some things that I thought I knew, but at the same time it's comforting to leave that in God's hands. But again, I feel like we've been reassured of things that are important, and I hope that other people can understand what I mean by that. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys spending the day sharing your story, and it was great to meet you guys. And we were talking here on the couch a little bit ago, like, we've never met before, but we have so much in common, and we can have that. Especially now that we're brothers and sisters in Christ, and but we've walked through this journey of similar things. So, but yeah, it's been great to meet you guys, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And if people want to reach out to you, do you want to put your email in the comments or
Yeah, I can do that.
your phone number? Probably not your phone number. All right. Well, we'll get your email. We can put it in the comments, and then people can reach out to you if they want to. So
Sounds good. Thank
Sure.
you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.